Good evening, everyone. Hello, how are you, Mr. Real?
I am so good, Mr. Radio Free Mormon. How are you?
I am fine. It's Wednesday evening, and we are gathered again for another episode, the 184th episode to be precise, of Mormonism Live.
Look at that. Every week, 6:20 p.m., folks. Glad you're with us. We have a vibrant live audience, and we really are excited to have you participate alongside with us.
I probably should make an announcement tonight.
Announce something. What would you like to announce?
I will announce about why I wasn't here last week.
Yeah.
And yes, it involved an emergency room that I had to go to, but I was not the subject. I was someone who was there to help out. So that's about all I have to say. Everything's fine now, so nobody needs to worry about anybody as far as that goes. But thank you all for all the prayers that I'm sure went heavenward from this audience on my behalf, at least all the good thoughts being sent my way. Thank you so much.
Yeah, super cool that that all worked out. Everybody's good, and now we're off to episode 184, my friend.
Yes, and this can you put up the thumbnail? Assuming you don't have anything you want to announce, Bill.
I have nothing I want to announce, so let me grab that off there and this on there.
There it is. There's you. There's I. And we have the Book of Mormon. We've got Anachronisms over there, and John E. Clark. We have a quote from him in the bottom right. By the way, before we go any further and before I forget, we have a guest tonight who I think we should probably bring on at this point. Rebecca Bibliotheca. There she is.
I wondered when you were going to let me on. I've been sitting here since the newscast hoping that maybe someone would just start up again.
Well, Rebecca invited herself on the show again tonight, so we said, okay, you can come on. No, actually, honestly, I say that in jest. I reached out to Rebecca to ask her to come on the show because we had discussions in the not too distant past about a certain chart that is now making the rounds again on various and sundry apologetic podcasts. And I recognized this chart that you sent to me because I knew that it was produced by John E. Clark back in 2005. John E. Clark is a professor of anthropology at Brigham Young University. He has letters after his name. He is a doctor of anthropology. And if we can go to the next slide, Bill, where we have that quote from him. Do you know where that went?
Yes, I do. It's going to take me 2 seconds to figure out how I get it.
Because it actually meant for it to be the second one. This is stuff we were doing right before we went live.
It was there before. I'll vouch for that. There it is.
There he is. There's John E. Clark. There's a picture of him, which may or not be AI. He kind of looks like Lurch in his younger days before he met the Addams family.
Yeah, and good-looking Lurch.
Yes, and this is what he says. He is the individual, by the way, who has pronounced that the Hill Cumorah is a clean site. There are no artifacts there. And this is the quote: the Hill Cumorah, archaeologically speaking, it is a clean hill. No artifacts, no walls, no trenches, no arrowheads. The area immediately surrounding the hill is similarly clean. Pre-Columbian people did not settle or build here. This is not the place of Mormons' last stand. We must look elsewhere for that hill. And that is from Archaeology and Cumorah Questions, the Journal of Book of Mormon Studies, Volume 13, Number 1, Article 15, page 151, so that you can look it up for yourself. But this is the death knell, actually. I would think of the Book of Mormon. I would think that 99 out of 100 people, if not 999 out of 1,000, if they were presented with this evidence, they would have a different last sentence. Instead of saying, we must look elsewhere for that hill, they would say, well, the Book of Mormon obviously did not happen. But no, that will never be the last sentence at the end of a paragraph by John E. Clark or any of them apologists, right? Because it's always something else. We have to look somewhere else. It doesn't make any difference what Joseph Smith and everybody else, including the first presidency with the Watson letter, said about the Hill Cumorah, and that's where the final last stand of the Nephites was. And if it's the final last stand of the Nephites, it's also the final last stand of the Jaredites, because it's the same hill according to the Book of Mormon. Same hill, different name. So there's nothing there. And the problem is that now John Clark is going to look elsewhere for that hill. John Clark is a Mesoamericanist. In other words, he thinks that the the main parts of the Book of Mormon that we read about happened in Mesoamerica, in Guatemala, and southern Mexico, in that area. So this is the reason. If the evidence doesn't support your position, look elsewhere. And I've got to tell you, I've told this joke before, but it's the perfect joke for this. This is the guy who's walking along the road. It's becoming dark out. He sees a guy in the middle of the road. Fortunately, there's not a lot of traffic. And he's scrounging around on his hands and knees. He's obviously looking for something. And the first guy says, "Did you lose something?" And the guy who's on the ground says, Yeah, I did. I lost a quarter. And the first guy says, "Really? Well, where'd you lose it?" And he says, "I lost it up the block." And he says, "Why are you looking for it here?" And the second guy says, "Well, the light is much better here."
It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's a joke, but this is what they're doing. They look at Cumorah where it's supposed to be, nothing there, so they go looking where the light is better. In other words, where they can find something in between the southern tip of South America and apparently the Arctic Circle in the Americas, and find anything that they can match up with the Book of Mormon. So that's why they've gone down to Mesoamerica, because it did not happen in New York, upstate, on the hill Cumorah, the way the Book of Mormon, well, the Book of Mormon doesn't say it, but Joseph Smith sure did. I mean, that's where he got the plates in the first place, from the hill Cumorah. And then, of course, there's all this argumentation and all these attempts to get around what Joseph Smith said. Oh, he didn't really mean that. And all the other people didn't really mean that. You know, every time you come up with a different theory, you're going to have all these problems that you're going to have to resolve somehow. And they've done their best. It just hasn't been persuasive. To me personally, I mean, it was for a while, right? Because I was in the Mesoamerican camp. But it certainly isn't to Rod Meldrum or any of the Heartlanders who are still convinced that, in spite of the fact that the hill Cumorah is a completely clean site, that's where it happened.
Yeah. And I'll just say too, tonight we're going to talk about anachronisms, and anachronisms are where something shows up that shouldn't be there. It doesn't belong there, right? Well, this is sort of the opposite side of the coin, which is we should expect to find things there and they're not there. And I think it'll be fun maybe through the evening tonight as we go through tonight's episode. There's a few things that you would expect to find that you don't, as well as the whole list of anachronisms of things you do find that you shouldn't.
Yeah, and there is the famous quote that lack of evidence is not evidence, right? Just because you don't find it doesn't mean that it's not right around the corner. And if you take a page out of Book of Mormon Central's book in their new series, A Marvelous Work, The Greatness of the Evidence, they're looking all over the world and finding things that they just sort of say, this might relate. This might be something. If it's here, it could have been there. And they're trotting around the globe.
Yeah, it's a funny statement, because in any other realm, an absence of evidence is itself evidence. Exactly. Yeah. As long as there's been reasonable diligence done in order to find the thing that you cannot find, the fact that you can't find it can and often is evidence of its own. Yeah. All right. So we've got this thing going. By the way, this is also about claims. Let's talk a little bit about, oh, that's right. I'm in charge of the slides. I'm sorry, Bill. I get so used to you turning the slides for me. You always do such a great job on that.
I'm a great slide turner.
You're the best.
Thank
so
you.
we got John Clark, Book of Mormon Claims. Now, technically, these are claims. Some of these are anachronisms, but they are not all anachronisms. So having said that out there, he created a couple of charts. One was for 1842, and the other was for 2005. And the first time that I saw this was in 2005, which I think, as far as I know, that was the first time he presented them. It was in May of that year. It was at the Library of Congress. They were having a 2-day symposium, which I watched at the time. It was broadcast, and it was in honor of the bicentennial of Joseph Smith's birthday in 2005. And the symposium at the Library of Congress was called The Worlds of Joseph Smith. So here we go. This is a 2005 fair presentation. So a couple of months after that, in July of that year, at the fair conference, John Clark presented basically the same thing that he had presented in May at the Library of Congress. And I think I've already said this, sometimes I go ahead and I just start talking and I end up covering my slides before I've even gotten to them. So he created 2 charts, one of which shows the state of Book of Mormon claims in 1842, and the second showing the same claims as of 2005. The results are, of course, astonishing and purport to show that as archaeology increases, so do the number of verified claims made by the Book of Mormon. So you'll see what this looks like here in a second. Oh, I also wanted to go to the Fair Mormon website, and there's about a 3-minute clip from the address that he gave there in which he gives his own argument about this chart. And I thought we would give him the respect of allowing him to say it in his own words on the show before we start addressing it.
On a global question that troubles some saints and critics. Could millions of people have lived in the area proposed as Book of Mormon lands? Yes, and they did. Mesoamerica is the only area in the Americas that sustained the high population densities mentioned in the Book of Mormon. In summary, the following items from Mesoamerican archaeology conform to claims made in the Book of Mormon. In terms of its claims for lands, peoples, cultural practices, populations, and chronology, the Book of Mormon gets better than passing marks. As a final check of the book's authenticity, we consider frequent complaints. As we have seen, standard arguments against the book concern things mentioned in the text but not found archaeologically, such as golden plates, horses, silk, elephants, wheat, and steel. This chart lists the supposed classic blunders and anachronisms of the Book of Mormon as compiled by 19th century critics. Here we see how matters stood in 1842, near the end of Joseph Smith's life. The few boxes of green confirmation come from the report on Maya cities published by Stevens in 1841. Overall, the sea of red indicates the Book of Mormon did not fare well as ancient history in Joseph Smith's lifetime. Let's see how things have changed since then. We've since found evidence in the old world of steel swords, metal plates for the right time and place, and in the new world, a strain of barley, thrones, cement, highways, military regalia, and assorted weapons, Hebrew words, evidence of reading and writing, and multiple expectations for geography and history. Since 1842, other items have been promoted to the status of possible but unconfirmed. They include horses, goats, and sheep, temples, scimitars, and large armies, a script that may qualify as Reformed Egyptian, and the era of Nephite peace. You get the picture. You have watched green and yellow boxes chase away red ones. Many Book of Mormon claims have been confirmed since 1842. Of course, many have not, and they may never be confirmed, but that is to be expected of the archaeological verification of any text. We can afford to be a bit more humble about physical evidence.
I think that was it.
After all, we live in a world in which we are not sure who shot JFK.
Oh, I'm sorry. It wasn't quite. He was about to say, after all, we're not sure who shot JFK or if O.J. Simpson killed his wife. So that's how he ends it. And I also want to further steelman it by adding the part, which I do not have the clip of here, where he argues that if the Book of Mormon were indeed fiction and made up by Joseph Smith, we should expect to see the trend going the other way, that as time goes on and further digs are done and archaeology is done, that more and more things would be disconfirmed about the Book of Mormon's claims. And instead, he argues that we see the opposite, that we see more and more things being confirmed, which is what we would expect from an actual historical book as opposed to a book of fiction. So I wanted to take the time to steelman it. You look like you have something you want to say about that, Bill.
Just that, if I can put this up, he's arguing that what few green dots there are, because we know those things were in the Americas and maybe in the right place at the right time, that we should expect them to turn red eventually and go the other direction. And that makes no sense, because once a thing has been confirmed as green, without some strange rationale, it would almost stay green forever, no matter what.
Yeah, I think that's true. Any thoughts from you, Rebecca?
Yeah, I was going to say the idea that there are archaeological advances, technological advances, more and more things are discovered. I believe that gives the apologist more wiggle room, like we see in Book of Mormon Central, find something anywhere in the world and sort of gerrymander it to fit anything that you want it to say, right? I feel like it gives you more and more material so that you can make it fit, craft it to the narrative that you need.
Very good. Well, certainly We've got a list here, which I counted. There's 20 in each of the 3 columns, so it's a total of 60, if my counting is correct, 60 different categories. So we're not going to go in depth on any of these. We're going to treat these in a similar way to the way that John Clark is presenting them and talk about them. We'll go into a little bit of depth about some of them, but obviously for any one of these categories, that would be an entire podcast. And we don't have 60 hours plus to go over this whole thing. But there are a number of important things that we can say about it. So there's his chart for the status of Book of Mormon claims in 1842. Red is unconfirmed, green is confirmed. And I say, let's look at a few of these 1842 claims individually. The claims made in the 1842 chart are designed to look impressive when compared with the 2005 chart, i.e., the more red boxes turning green, the more it looks like archaeology is vindicating the Book of Mormon. This puts a great deal of power in the hands of the person who creates the categories for the list, not only which to include in the list, but how to describe them. For example, burial mounds, or just mounds, could have been used because they appear in the Book of Mormon. But as of 1842, it would already be green. Hence, no dramatic change from red to green in 2005. A little bit more about burial mounds, and I'll get your opinions about this. Mounds are large earthen mounds. We know that they exist, but they exist in North America. I don't think they exist in Mesoamerica. Otherwise, we'd be hearing a lot more about it from John E. Clark. Joseph Smith would have known about these mounds in North America. In fact, I believe that Joseph Smith may have thought the hill Cumorah was one of these mounds instead of a drumlin hill. John Clark is focusing on Mesoamerica because that is where he believes the Book of Mormon took place. These types of North American mounds apparently are not present in Mesoamerica, and hence they do not get included on the list. Any thoughts about what to include and what not to include on this list? First with Rebecca.
Yeah, I feel like obviously it doesn't support his narrative of Mesoamerica, so it's not going to be there. When you're absolutely right, this would be probably number 1, right? It's very obvious. They talk about mounds, and here are mounds. But because he has a different narrative of the location that he needs it to be, he's not going to include that. So you're absolutely right. The person who has created the list is the omnipotent person, and they're going to craft the entire list to make the reader see what they want to see and arrive at the conclusion that they want to have them very dramatically arrive at, that everything has gone green and everything is right in Zion.
Bill?
I just get the feeling that if we had like Michael Coe, for instance, or a non-Mormon professional anthropologist, archaeologist, they would form this list very differently, and all of these greens would probably still be red. So, and we'll get into some of those tonight. So anyway.
This is one of the problems, and it bothered me a little bit when I was an apologist, but I spent a lot of time not thinking about this particular issue, which is, why is it that these scholars for FARMS, the Foundation for Ancient Research and Mormon Studies, now the Neal A. Maxwell Institute, why is it that their papers, which are supportive of the Book of Mormon, get published in the Journal of Book of Mormon Studies or the Interpreter instead of a peer-reviewed academic non-Mormon journal?
I think they know better than to submit them to any peer-reviewed non-Mormon journal.
Well, they may have submitted them, but apparently the journals know better than to print them.
It goes both ways.
It would be a huge thing if they got something of this published. And of course, we know that John Gee and Carrie Muhlestein in the Egyptology field, we talked about this a number of years ago, Bill, they will write papers which are acceptable to the Egyptological community, and then they'll put in nuggets that they can use later to support the Book of Abraham. And then they're quoting from published things, but it wasn't what they got published about. It's something they secreted in there in order to use at a later date. Do you remember that, Bill?
Yeah, there's always games being played, isn't there?
Oh, tricky. I have to say about the words on the list. I mean, again, the word choice is unusual, and it's also very nebulous. And I've seen variations of this list. People have tried to expand on it. I've seen things like a category called dirt. Well, what does that mean? Dirt. Is there dirt in Mesoamerica? I guess yes. How about the heartland? Yes. Was there dirt mentioned in the Book of Mormon? I mean, it's almost impossible to understand what the person is meaning who put it on the chart and how it could be confirmed or not confirmed in the way that it's presented. Dirt.
Right. And I have no idea who's doing that. All I can say, I mean, that could be parody as far as I could tell.
It seems like it.
But Johnny Clark does not have dirt on his chart. Something else he doesn't have, which you had mentioned, Rebecca, has to do with infant baptism.
Oh, yes. That's one of my favorites, infant baptism. And I've seen that on another chart. And it did say that that has successfully been moved to green. So we do not need to worry anymore.
I'm
Yes.
sure it has.
I felt better because that's
Yeah.
one of my little hot buttons.
I'm sure they were all about the issue of infant baptism among the ancient Mayans. That
Yep.
was an issue of
Number
burning
one concern. Yeah.
Yes. And something else that's not on there, by the way. I looked and couldn't find wheels.
Well, because that would still be red, wouldn't it?
Well, the problem is, of course, that they say, well, wheels aren't mentioned in the Book of Mormon, just chariots.
Yeah, but how do horses pull chariots? And you and I were talking before the show, and you said, well, maybe there's sleds. And I'm thinking about the terrain in Mesoamerica,
Right.
and I don't think sleds are going to work really well. But maybe, what if?
And
I
that's why they
know.
didn't have wheels either. And that's why they didn't have the draft animal. And in fact, they've even said, we're not saying that anything was pulled by a horse, a little teeny mini horse.
Right.
So when I think of it, when I picture these battles, I picture a sled light, maybe like Santa's sleigh, right? With horses standing next to it, but not pulling it. Maybe the warriors are pulling it. I mean, it's very problematic.
It's like the White Queen in the Lion, the
Yes.
Witch, and the Wardrobe with
Yep.
the polar bears pulling her sled.
Exactly. Only
That
this
doesn't-
it would be tapirs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't want to get off in the weeds, but doesn't the Book of Mormon note the horses and the chariots in the same
Yes, it does.
verses?
Yeah, but it
and
never says they're connected.
And
They
that
make
the
it
horses
very
need to
clear.
get ready so that the
Yes.
chariots can go to the next
Yeah.
town. And
Yes.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
okay.
the Lamanites ordering
horses-
him to go get his horses and chariots ready so he can go on a journey.
Yeah.
Now, the
They have
horses are
nothing to do with it.
decorative, purely decorative. They're
Yes.
not functional. They're not draft animals.
Yes, what happened was the Nephites or the Lamanites themselves were dragging the sled while the horses walked along beside.
That's
Or
what
they
I
were
think.
put inside the sled. The sled was to
Basically-
carry the horses.
Maybe it is. It's like Yukon Cornelius.
Is that
So
getting
it-
your cart before the horse? Or is that-
And the horses are walking beside them at waist height
Yeah.
because they're little.
Little tiny, teeny horses. Yeah.
So anyway, let me go on. Why not choose burial mounds? Okay. So 1842 list, Hebrew language confirmed, ? He has it as confirmed. And I reproduced it right there, that little piece at the bottom in the middle, Hebrew language with a green. And I'm going, what the what? The presence of scientifically verified Hebrew language in the Americas during Book of Mormon times was not present in 1842. If someone out there knows better than I do on that, please correct me. Nor is it in 2005, nor today in 2024, to the best of my knowledge. He, John Clark, is probably going off research by Brian Stubbs, which, to the best of my knowledge, has not been published in a peer-reviewed academic journal. Brian Stubbs has, since the 1980s, been trying to make connections between the Udo-Aztecan language and Hebrew. And he's certainly been published in the Journal of Book of Mormon Studies, but I don't think he's been published anywhere else. If I'm wrong about that, please correct me.
And I think that the again, I don't want to get off in the weeds, but I think at times they're counting things like the Decalogue stone or
Mhm.
various artifacts that have been found that majority of scholars and experts find to be frauds,
Yes.
fake stuff, but that it does have language on it, and hence maybe that's the one.
I don't know, but I just thought of the Bat Creek stone. Now, the Bat
Mhm.
Creek stone was not discovered until
Similar.
1873, I think, or 1889. So it's well after the Book of Mormon, but it's in this category of artifacts found allegedly in America with ancient Hebrew or Phoenician written on them. So the Bat Creek inscription is an inscribed stone tablet found by John W. Emert on February 14th, Valentine's Day, 1889. Honey, I brought you a stone. Emert claimed to have found the tablet in Tipton Mound 3 during an excavation of Hopewell Mounds in Loudoun County, Tennessee. This excavation was part of a larger series of excavations that aimed to clarify the controversy regarding who was responsible for building the various mounds found in the eastern United States. Remember, there's a huge source of controversy. We know that they're there. It doesn't look like the Native Americans that we find present today are building any mounds. They're not interested in mounds. These are ancient and built by a different civilization, apparently. And then who built them is the question. Hey, Bill, could you read the rest of this for me?
The second two paragraphs.
Yes, please.
Okay, so let me. In the late 19th century, when the tablet was found, Cyrus Thomas, the director of the mound excavations, concluded the inscription presented letters from the Cherokee alphabet. This interpretation was accepted at the time, but was contested about a century later by Cyrus H. Gordon, a scholar of Near Eastern cultures and ancient languages, who examined the tablet in the 1970s and proposed that the inscription represented Paleo-Hebrew of the 1st or 2nd century. The consensus among archaeologists is that the tablet is a hoax, although some have argued that the ancient Hebrew text on the stone supports pre-Columbian transoceanic contact theories, countering the notion of the pre-Columbian transoceanic contact theories. Archaeologists Robert Mainfort and Mary Quass have concluded that the inscription is not a genuine Paleo Hebrew artifact, but rather a 19th century forgery. Furthermore, the conclusions drawn by Mainfort and Quass have been accepted by other archaeologists and members of academic communities. Wah, 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 wah.
Right. Well, of course, if you're an apologist, you're probably more likely to go with Cyrus Gordon, who was no small beans when it came to being a scholar of Near Eastern cultures. But he adopted a fringe position, which is not accepted by the vast majority of other scholars on this. And this Bat Creek stone is not alone. There are a host of 19th century discoveries in the Americas that are claimed to be dug up that are representative of the ancient Hebrews. And once again, it was very much thought by many people during that time period that the actual builders of the mounds and the ancestors of the Native Americans were Hebrew in origin. And those people, when they found these items, these artifacts, they tended to support their belief and their theory. Rebecca, do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I was just going to say that when you find something that supports your narrative in a big way, like these kinds of things do, your parameters for your scholarship are not very strict, are they? You're very excited about it. And even though it may not be completely accurate, it's a possibility that it's a hoax, you're still going to mention it. Because if you will mention enough of these things, then there's this weight of evidence. Can I say, the weight of the evidence? And people don't get the part that it might be a hoax. Just the other day, I heard somebody talking about this, the Bat Creek stone. And I thought, doesn't everyone understand that that's already been sort of debunked? They don't. They hear about it. It supports their narrative. And it's very exciting to talk about.
If I got up now, which I'm not going to do, I could go over and get my quad, my big size quad, which I got in 1985, I think it was. And I have a number of pictures that use a copy machine, copied them off, cut them down to size, and then put a line of paste on one edge and then pasted it into my scriptures. One of them is the Bat Creek stone, so that I would have that with me when I was going out, and I could, discuss it with different people who might have different points of view about Mormonism. And I could convince them of the truth of my way using what is almost certainly a fraud to do it. So we have a strange situation where it appears that fraudulent artifacts are being marshaled in order to support a fraudulent book.
Yeah, and I would just say, if the majority of experts and scholars have a consensus that it is a forgery, it probably is inappropriate to use such as evidence of a thing that's highly believed to be a fake. Yeah. Meaning the Book of Mormon.
Right. So, and Julie Hanks, by the way, hi, Julie. Thanks for joining us. She says, as long as there's one anachronism left on the chart, there's still a huge problem. That's right. One anachronism sinks the ship. And the argument being that we're always discovering, we're always learning, we're always finding new things. And that since the trend is going from red to green, then we should be able to have faith that the rest of the red will go to green if given enough time. Even though at one point he does say, we may never find answers to any of these, but we found enough that we should be able to have faith that they are there, even if we haven't or never find them. And I think that, let me see here. I think the one that they're going to end up having trouble with, I'm going to go back a little bit again to this chart. Okay. It's the center column, second from the bottom. I think the submarine barges, we're going to be waiting a long time before they find that, 3,000-year-old submarine barges. Probably not going to happen. I think that might be what he has in mind for some of those things that we're never going to find. But we should
Right.
have
And
faith
I've heard
in the
apologists say that, like you said, you would never expect that. And God doesn't want it that way. That's your faith. If he gave you all green, the green light, that doesn't give you the opportunity to exercise faith. So you need these submarine barges and anything else that's not going to turn green so that you can exercise faith. It's a part of it. They do not expect everything to be solved.
Right. Which is, yeah, that's an argument. It's an argument to
It's an
explain
argument.
away why everything isn't solved yet. So
Exactly.
let me go back to where I was, the Back Creek Stone, and why use the year 1842? He mentioned it in passing, but this is because of Stevens and Catherwood, and they're coming back from Mesoamerica and with their book about their travels and a lot of wonderful drawings that Catherwood had done of ancient Mayan ruins. So in 1836, by the way, Rebecca, could you read this? Can you read this?
Can I? If I lean in, I can. In
Okay.
1836, oh, there you go. How nice.
Thanks,
In
Belle.
1836, Frederick Catherwood met travel writer John Lloyd Stevens in London. They read the account of the ruins of Copan published by Juan Galindo and decided to try to visit Central America for themselves and produce a more detailed and better illustrated account.
Can you
The
stop right there for a
expedition-
second?
Yes.
I asked you to read so I could interrupt you.
Oh, of course you did.
No, but I just wanted to mention something. Okay. These two are not just going down to Guatemala and bumbling around in the jungle and hoping they'll run into something. No, they read a book
Right.
about it. They read the account of the ruins of Copan published by Juan Galindo. There are already books published about this. It is not unknown. And I bring that up because there is an artificial line that is intimated by apologists, and which I kind of fell for a while. That 1842 is the bright line. They come back. It's around 1841. They're celebrities. You know, they have this wonderful book, and they're going everywhere, and they've got a wonderful following. And it comes to the attention of the Mormons in Nauvoo, and they write about it in the Times and Seasons. And that Times and Seasons article is published in July of 1842, which is why I believe that chart that John Clark used is dated to 1842. So if you would go on, please.
That makes sense. All right, let's see. Where was I? The expedition came together in 1839 and continued through the following year, visiting dozens of ruins and resulting in the detailed description of 44 sites, many for the first time. Stevens and Catherwood are credited for the rediscovery of the Mayan civilization, and through their publications brought the Mayans back into the minds of the Western world.
Is there not more?
There was. I thought you might want to say something, so I just paused
no.
right there.
I'll interrupt you when I want to say something.
Oh, there you go. Okay. The expedition resulted in the book Incidents of Travel in Central America. And let's see, sorry, it's still a little small. Can you blow it up a little bit, Bill? Sorry about that.
Oh,
yes. Because it was a different color. That's 41 with text by Stevens and engravings based on the drawings of Catherwood. Stevens and Catherwood returned to the Yucatan to make further explorations, resulting in Incidents of Travel in Yucatan in 1843.
Great. Hey, Bill, can you read this about Frederick Catherwood? He's the artist.
Yep. So Frederick Catherwood was an English artist, architect, and explorer, best remembered for his meticulously detailed drawings of the ruins of the Maya civilization. He explored Mesoamerica in the mid-19th century with writer John Lloyd Stevens. Their books, Incidents of Travel in Central America, Chiapas in Yucatan, and The Incidents of Travel in Yucatan were the bestsellers and introduced to the Western world the civilization of the ancient Maya. In 1837, Catherwood was elected into the National Academy of Design as an honorary member.
So this is a guy who knows something about what he's talking about. His knowledge is pretty much as good as it can be in 1842 regarding these things. And he'd also earlier gone over to the Mediterranean to make sketches of ruins there in the Old World. Catherwood, having made many trips to the Mediterranean between 1824 and 1832 to draw the monuments made by the Egyptians, Carthaginians, and Phoenicians. Oh my. Stated that, and this is why I have this highlighted and why I went to all the trouble to show that this is a guy who knows what he's talking about. Stated that the monuments in the Americas bear no architectural similarity to those in the Old World. Thus, they must have been made by the native people of the area. So we'll use Catherwood when it helps, but we don't want to talk about this too much. I think I got this just from Wikipedia. Catherwood made visits to Greece, Turkey, Egypt, and Palestine, and with Joseph Bonami the Younger, not to be confused with Alma Bonami the Younger, made drawings and watercolors of the ancient remains there. During a 6-week period in 1833, Catherwood was probably the first Westerner to make a detailed survey of the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. All right. So he knows the two different kinds of architecture in the Old World and in the New. And so they're completely different according to him. But we're not going to talk about that if we're apologists. See, that's the difference in not being an apologist anymore, is that I can talk about both sides of the story. I don't limit it just to one side, the one that favors my argument. I can talk about both. And I find, since I started doing that, that is a methodology that is more likely to arrive at the truth than simply omitting half of the information from the discussion.
Yeah, I could play the Carrie Molstein bite. I could also play the, when we have questions we don't know the answers to, those are the questions we'll avoid.
Yes.
Some of those seem sort of fitting, but I won't. Let's
see what happens next. Oh, yeah, here's the times and seasons. And this is from the Joseph Smith Papers Project, where I grabbed this in their editorial note. I'll just go down to the one that is highlighted and ask Bill if you can read that.
Yes. So the editorial commentary that followed the excerpts quoted by the Book of Mormon and cited the contemporary findings of explorers John Lloyd Stephens and Frederick Catherwood to further substantiate priests' ideas, concluding that these evidences establish the existence of an ancient Israelite civilization. The editorial argued that the history of this ancient people could be found in the Book of Mormon.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to ask what that was. However, yeah. So they're doing this with Josiah Priest's American Antiquities and Discoveries in the West, which was published in 1833, and also with the Stephens and Catherwood book, which was just blowing up the internet back then in 1842. Oh, talk about an anachronism. But this is from Times and Seasons, 15 July, 1842. And this is why there comes this point. And as an apologist, and I'm not proud to say this, but I felt like 1842 was the dividing line. And before that, nobody knew anything about Mesoamerica, South America, these ancient civilizations. And it wasn't until 1841, 1842, when Catherwood and Stephens come back from the mines that finally we find out about it. But, after a while, I started coming to grips with reality a little bit. It's a painful process, but fruitful. But this is why the chart uses 1842. Implication is that little to nothing was known before Catherwood and Stephens. However, this is where I had to think about things. But was the Spanish conquest of the Aztec Empire, which happened 300 years before the Book of Mormon, 300 years from 1519 to 1521, was that really unknown to the inhabitants of early 19th century America 300 years later? Unlikely. Or what about the Spanish conquest of the Incan Empire, which I have 1832 to 1872. I think that's actually 1532 to 1572. Anyway, 1842 can become an art of, and actually, if you'll look that up, Bill, the Spanish conquest of the Incan Empire, I think I wrote it in there as 18 when it should be 1532 to 1572. 1842 can become an artificial line of demarcation on American ignorance of ancient American civilizations, unless we start realizing that, yes, Europeans knew a lot about the ancient inhabitants of the Americas by virtue of their colonialization of the Incas and the Mayans, Incas and the Aztecs, excuse me. Go ahead, Bill.
Yes, 1532 to 1572.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
Any comments, by the way, about that artificial line of 1842?
I think that's a very good observation. I also feel like everybody at that time, it was just in their mind that someone from the Middle East, Israelites, had created everything that they were hearing about and knew. And so here's something different. I think even if they did hear that statement, no, these were native people that made their own culture, I don't know if they would really hear it, because it was just so ingrained in everybody, the idea that the Israelites were the ones that had formed America, settled America. I don't know if it would even be understood.
Well, I haven't done any studies in the Aztecs or the Incans or Incas or the conquest, right? But I know about it. I mean, how do you not know about that? It's so famous, right?
Right.
So, having said that much, did you want to say something, Bill?
No.
Okay. Spanish conquest, by the way, provides a lot of information for the chart. Thrones, palaces, large cities, fortifications, highways, military costumes, large armies, knowledge about the Spanish conquistadores, okay, helps us understand that, yes, the ancient inhabitants of America had empires with all these things. And I wrote those things 1 through 7 because if you look, those are 7 of the categories on here in the middle. They have thrones, palaces, large cities, fortifications, skipping cement, highways, military costumes, and then going down to 4th up from the bottom, large armies. And I'm sitting there looking at all those red boxes in 1842 and thinking, really, anybody who has any understanding, even a smattering of understanding about the empires of the Incas and the Aztecs would know about those things and that they existed anciently in America.
In other words, more of these boxes should have started off green to begin with. And hence it's not this magical transformation that he wants to point to, that there are things that were even known long before 1842, that the boxes should have been green from the start.
That's what I'm aiming at. What do you think, Rebecca?
Well, I kind of feel like the whole list, and keep in mind, this list was created, it was curated, things were left out, things were added. I feel like the whole list was green in his mind to begin with. And then he just kind of retrofitted, the things that people might know about, but he now knows are green. I feel it's kind of going backwards and forwards as a faith building exercise.
Okay, I think so. So there's the Spanish conquest. And status of Book of Mormon Claims in 2005. This is the second of his charts, where now so much more is green. There's still a good deal of red on it, but a lot of things have gone to green. And so that is the idea. That's the argument. Like Julie Hanks had mentioned, as long as you have one on there, you're going to have problems. Yes, but you must have faith because it's all heading in the right direction. Book of Mormon is historical. Otherwise, we wouldn't see all this red turning to green.
Yeah, I call this the stay in the boat graph, because look how many things have changed. You wouldn't want to leave now. Tomorrow, they're probably going to turn something that was a solid red to green. So don't leave now. You're going to miss it.
Well, when those submarine barges go from red to green, I'll stay in the submarine barge.
You heard it here.
I'll eat my hat. And there they are, both put together. They're a bit overlapping, 1842 on the bottom left, 2005 in the upper right. If I made them small enough for you to see all of it, then they'd be too small to read. But I wanted to be able to have a slide with them side by side so you can see the dramatic shift from red to green. It is definitely going green. And that was Rebecca's. I stole it.
You did.
So let's talk about East and West Seas. Now, if you look over on the right, East and West Seas. I'm pretty sure it's on there somewhere. I'm so sorry.
It's far right, about 2/3 of the way down. East and West Seas. The only green mark there in 1842.
Right. It was green in 1842. It's still green in 2005. Yes, there are East and West Seas in the Americas, but note both the 1842 and the 2005 charts have East and West Seas as being green and therefore confirmed. And then I say question mark, okay? Because John Clark is a Mesoamerican Book of Mormon apologist. That means that the East and West Seas are not necessarily the East Coast of the United States and the West Coast of the United States or of South America. The Isthmus of Tehuantepec is the narrow neck of land. Right there, and it's marked. The problem that the apologists have with that, and which they wrestle with mightily, believe me, I read the books on it back in the 90s, is that they're not dealing with an East Sea and a West Sea. What they're dealing with is a North Sea and a South Sea because of the east to west bend that is made in southern Mexico at the point of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec.
Yeah, you're
I'm
go ahead.
questioning whether that should be green. I think that should be a red.
Yeah. You're saying that the waters that are supposed to go east on the east side and on the west side aren't where they're supposed to be.
Yeah, someone move the waters.
Yeah.
Well, they're living waters. That's why.
Well,
But you
back
see-
back when there was Pangea.
Yes.
Exactly. That's it.
And so this is a problem. On the north, you got the Gulf of Mexico. On the south, you got the Pacific Ocean. And, I've read the writings of apologists who have tried to deal with this in one way or another. And really, it's not terribly persuasive because they're trying to make a North Sea into an East Sea and the South Sea into a West Sea. Okay. So that's one of them. By the way, once again, we're just touching on these. We're not going to go into all of them by any means and not into a whole lot of depth on any of them. But I wanted to point that out. Yeah, Sorensen tried to tilt the map 45 degrees. Exactly. See, Sorensen and other Mormon apologists will literally move the world to defend the Book of Mormon. If the world is not in the right direction for the Book of Mormon to be true, we'll just move it and we'll tilt it 45 degrees.
Yeah.
For no reason except we got to make the Book of Mormon true. By the way, do you have that quote? Did you find that quote, Rebecca? It might be down in a lower slide having to do with the methodology of the Book of Mormon apologists.
Oh, the anachronisms, how they, yeah, I think it is on the lower slide. I think I have it. The difference between apparent anachronism and actual anachronism. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, do you know what slide that is?
It's way down at the bottom, but of course I print everything out, so I could even start reading. It's in the bonus material, probably like 3 from the bottom. So
I can put it up on the screen.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Do you want me to read the whole? Because I think it's really good to go through and then arrive at that red quote right there. So, and I got this off of Fair Mormon discussing what is an anachronism. And it says there's a big difference between an apparent anachronism and an actual anachronism. I didn't know there was a difference, but apparently there is. There's a big difference between an apparent or possible anachronism and an actual anachronism. An apparent anachronism is one that gives current data, that given current data seems to exist. In the current world, it seems like it's an anachronism. An apparent anachronism may or may not be recognized as one that might expire given more data. An actual anachronism is one that everybody agrees exists. It will be agreed that it will not expire given more time and study. And then it gives some examples. So an example of an
As long as
apparent
the Mormon apologists don't agree that it's an actual anachronism,
yes,
it will forever remain an apparent or possible anachronism.
That's right. And when it comes to the Book of Mormon, everything is apparent. This is what I learned. So an example of an apparent anachronism is the horse in ancient America. We do not know that there weren't horses in America during Book of Mormon times and in Book of Mormon lands. But given more time, we may find horse remains. It's sort of so you're saying there's a chance, right? It's that kind of anachronism. Now, an example of an actual anachronism is saying that Abraham Lincoln called his wife Mary Todd on a cell phone. We know that cell phones weren't invented during the life of Abraham Lincoln. This is an actual anachronism. Now, here comes the line that just floored me, and I had to put it in bright red. As apologists, we obviously believe that all anachronisms either don't exist or are merely apparent or possible anachronisms. What do you guys think about that?
Well, why did that jump out to you?
It jumped out to me because there's absolutely no room for them not to be wrong. They may not know now, but they eventually will be right. There is no room for any of the rest of us to be correct in what we're thinking or studying or researching. It's only a matter of time. It is absolutely inconceivable that any of these would be actual anachronisms that might affect the historicity of the Book of Mormon.
When you consider how often you have to play the what if game, in other words, there seems to be an apparent problem, but maybe the solution at some future point will come forward and that will then vindicate us. Hence, we are going to hold out hope that at some future moment, that new piece of data comes forward. And what you're essentially acknowledging is that in the present moment, the indicators are that your point of view is bunk. And you're going to hold out hope for evidence that you don't know exists, but you hope exists, which is an act of faith. It's not how rational thinking works. Rational thinking works based on what the current data says. And only an irrational mind will say, I know the data as it's currently constituted makes my belief false, but I'm going to continue to believe it, knowing at some future point data that I couldn't possibly know exist will come forward and then vindicate me.
Right. And they're very, very happy to pronounce an actual anachronism about Abraham Lincoln having a cell phone, right? Ha ha ha. But
It's so extreme.
if the Book of Mormon or another set of Mormon scripture talked about cell phones having existed in the 18th century, or excuse me, the 19th century, I should say, during Abraham Lincoln's lifetime, then that would not be an actual anachronism anymore. They would insist it is only an apparent or possible anachronism. And
Well,
I think that gives away the game.
It does. And I can already see the workaround on that because Brad Wilcox himself has said that the seer stone was much like a cell phone. So there is that little wiggle room.
Yeah, we'd be hearing a lot more about that in favor of it being a possible or apparent anachronism, because Joseph Smith had the equivalent of a cell phone in 1829.
Yep.
All right, so let me see here about, we were on slide 20 before, right there, and let's go on. The narrow neck of land, okay? And the narrow neck of land is also on the right. It is right above the East and West Seas. It was red in 1842. If we look over on the 2005 map, we see that it is now green. So nobody knew that there was a narrow neck of land between North and South America in 1842, apparently. You see, all you have to do is think about any of these with just a few seconds and a few, I don't know, synapses clicking, and you start running into these problems. Nobody knew that there was a narrow neck of land between North and South America in 1842. Is that really what you're saying, John Clark? I think he'd probably want to add a few more words to it. But here's the narrow neck of land, and it went from red to green on the charts. It's the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, which they maintain is the narrow neck of land. Now, you might think that's strange because that's not really that narrow. In fact, a Nephite would have a lot of trouble getting across that narrow neck of land. What, a 3 days journey for a Nephite? No, the narrow neck of land would much more obviously apply to the Isthmus of Panama, which is down there, right northwest of South America and Colombia. That would be a much more likely proponent or candidate for the narrow neck of land in the Book of Mormon. Do you know why they move it to the Isthmus of Tehuantepec instead of the much more obvious Panama?
I'm going to guess there has to be other countless problems with having it be at the other location.
Yeah, it can't be at that location because Guatemala is ground zero for the Mayans. And I believe that's true. If it's not correct, oh, I guess it's not true. Who the heck was that? Was that Growling Alice?
I think my visiting teachers are coming over. My dogs are barking. I'm going to mute for a minute.
Okay. So just pretend you're not home. So the problem is that right there in Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador, around there is where the Mayan Empire was. And that is not necessarily the Nephites, but it's right around where the Nephites were. The Nephites were living in the shadows of the Mayans, according to the Mesoamerican Apologist. Because of that, and because of the fact that we know historically that, yes, they did move northward well, I should say in the Book of Mormon, they moved northward through the narrow neck of land in the Book of Mormon. Therefore, it could not be Panama because we don't have the Mayans south of that narrow neck. It has to be a narrow neck that is north of the location that they have selected for the Book of Mormon to take place.
They need the Mayan.
Yeah.
They need the Mayan culture, and to move it further south to Panama means you avoid the Mayan culture. So now you have another hiccup. You have to have all these puzzle pieces all have to fit, and everywhere you go, you can't have it be in Palmyra, New York, where the Hill Cumorah is. That's got problems. You can't have it be at the Isthmus of, say that word again.
Tehuantepec.
Yeah, you can't have it be there because it doesn't really fit the geography. But then if you move it too far south, where the geography might fit a little better, where the neck of land is a little narrower, and that would make more sense to a people, then you don't have the Mayan culture. And so everywhere you go, there are things that don't add up.
Yeah, if it were in Costa Rica or Panama, this narrow neck, then you wouldn't have the problem with the East Sea and the West Sea because it's much more east and west of those locations. You have to move it up to Tehuantepec to be the narrow neck of land. It's the only candidate that is north of Guatemala. So that must be the place in spite of all the difficulties that it creates.
And remember, the only reason we're down here to begin with is because the hill Cumorah is a clean hill, and it's obviously not the location for the Book of Mormon.
Even
Right.
though Joseph Smith said it's heartland model. Joseph Smith was a heartlander, right? And I will say that as new discoveries come out, you see him kind of wiggle around and move things. Well, it could be here. What about this? We just discovered this here, and there's Chambaga here. And what about, the possibilities are endless till you end up with Marvelous Work and a Wonder on Book of Mormon Central, where and in a segment about the mounds, they literally said the Book of Mormon is everywhere. It's in everyone's backyard. Anyone that reads it can go out in their backyard and think, is there something here? Is there an artifact here? Anywhere in the entire world. The entire world is their playground when it comes to proving the historicity of the Book of Mormon.
Right. So there's the narrow neck of land. It goes along with the East Sea and the West Sea. And they're both problematic. All right. So once again, we go to the north to south large river. And that goes from red to green. And that is on the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up from the bottom. You see N-S large river. That stands for a large river that goes from north to south, which is apparently is talked about in the Book of Mormon. It's probably the River Sidon. So that goes from red to green in 2005. This river flowing north to south, the main river. So if we go to the Guatemala area, they actually have two rivers to choose from, the Grijalva River and the Usumacinta River. And both of them go roughly north to south, at least from the midsection where they go north to south. Obviously, there's a place where they go south to north, where they empty into the Gulf of Mexico, right? But up in the mountains, then you'll have them go the right direction for the Book of Mormon. There are two rivers that you can choose from. And it's important to recognize that even among the Mesoamerican apologists for the Book of Mormon, there is by far not unanimity among them as to which of these two rivers would be the River Sidon in the Book of Mormon. Some come down with the Grijalva, others go down with the Usumacinta. And same thing for different locations like the Waters of Mormon or different sites or the land of Nephi or the city of Nephi mentioned there. Different apologists have different sites or ancient sites that they think qualify for those. It is not unanimous. It is not clear cut. It is still something where they have to force things to fit. And that's what results in differing opinions about which of these is the correct river. Any comments about the Grijalva and Usumacinta?
I would just say what my co-host on Mormonish Landon always says, the largest and only anachronism that you need is that no one can tell you where this happened. No one can pin this down. No one, like you see right here, can say this is definitively the river. Until you can do that, don't talk to me about any other anachronisms. You do not know where it is. And if you go on the church's website, they clearly say in the topics and questions, we have no position on where this happened. So right there, no credibility. Everything's a moot point.
Right. And one might think that the Grijalva and the Usumacinta rivers are the only large rivers flowing north to south in the Americas. Well, if you thought that, you probably... Oh, I want to give a little bit background on this. I'm sorry. The Grijalva River, formerly known as Tabasco River, blah, blah, blah. It's a 480-kilometer long river in southeastern Mexico. It is named after Spanish conquistador Juan de Grijalva, who visited the area in 1518, which means that somebody knew about this before 1829. In fact, a long time before 1829. The Usumacinta River has, I'm not going to read through all that, but that's its background there. And if you want to read that later, go ahead. Oh, there's another north to south large river. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called the Mississippi. That's a north to south river too, isn't it?
Yeah, if you use the hemispheric model of the Book of Mormon, which has all but died out at this point, but there might be a few people out there still reading along that think that the entire North and South America make up the Book of Mormon.
Right. And it's clear to me that that's what Joseph Smith believed. A lot of times the Mesoamerican guys and gals, they get all excited when Joseph Smith, as the editor of the Times and Seasons, looks approvingly at Catherwood and Stevens and the Mayans and said, this is evidence of the Nephites, right? As if Joseph Smith is now limiting the Book of Mormon to Mesoamerica. No, I think if you look at Joseph Smith in his totality and everything he said, anything that was found North, South America, anywhere, is going to be evidence of the Nephites. It wasn't something that was located strictly in Mesoamerica, but he believed in the hemispheric model, which is North and South America is the New World. It's the promised land. And that narrow neck of land is the Panama Isthmus.
Yeah, and you can see that, with Zelph, for instance, being a Nephite warrior. You can see that when Brigham Young and the Saints out west even claim things in Utah are a product of the Nephites or Lamanites. It becomes clear, as you're pointing out, yes, he made that reference, but it's not that he's limiting the geography. He's essentially saying all of this hemisphere is evidence of the Book of Mormon. There are Nephite and Lamanite evidence all over the place, from one ocean to the other, from one continent to the other.
Yeah, in a way, Rebecca, Joseph Smith started out where the Scripture Central people ended up. If you find anything that supports the Book of Mormon, regardless of where it is in the Americas, yes.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And I will say, having gone to the Church History Museum in downtown Salt Lake several times in the last year, they kind of support that narrative. The senior guys that talk to you talk about artifacts everywhere. They mention things wherever they happen to be, Mesoamerica, Heartland, and, talk about metal alloys and artifacts, Nephi Lamanites. So yeah, I think whatever fits and whatever increases your faith, it's okay to talk about.
And really, back in the 1970s, when I got a hold of a paperback copy of the Book of Mormon that was given to me by my best friend, this is the one where they had the pictures in the front.
Yeah.
And they have pictures of Chichen Itza.
Yep.
And other places, without any regard or mention of the fact that they are long after the Book of Mormon time period. So, they were doing that then as well.
And there was a huge industry, tourism, in the 70s and early 80s. My grandparents went traveling all over Mesoamerica with the LDS tours. And when they'd come back, we'd all sit down and they'd have a slideshow of everything that they'd seen. This is back in the day, 60s, 70s, 80s. And yeah, exactly. It was all a Book of Mormon narrative. They were looking at actual Mayan ruins, Aztec artifacts, but everything had a priesthood purpose. A hole in the ground is a baptismal font, right? A spire is a temple. So it was a huge industry back then.
How tall were the spires back then?
Not tall enough, apparently.
Anything from you, Bill?
I was just looking for an image of the old video, Ancient America Speaks.
Yes, I remember
which you can find. You can still watch it on YouTube, 34 minutes long, it looks like.
Yeah.
Paul Chapman.
And it doesn't matter to them where they find the evidence. It can be anywhere in North and South America. And if it has any resemblance, if there's a hole in the ground, it's a baptismal font, and it doesn't matter where it's located.
Yeah.
So you can see that sort of play out in Mormonism of the 1970s and 80s as well.
Oh, right. It's not a very rigorous methodology.
Not at all.
No, because what they should be doing, do you need me to say this? I doubt it. If you have a place that you propose the place and then find everything that fits in that place.
Yeah, you can't do that, though.
It seems so backwards. I don't know why you would say that.
I know, doesn't it? And they have not been able to find it, and the church can't find one, and so they take no position on it because it never happened anywhere.
Yep.
That should be your first big clue.
It should.
And Vogel says Joseph Smith's contemporaries saw all the mounds and ruins creating a chain running from Peru to the Great Lakes. That makes sense too. And I remember when I joined the church, you've got the Rocky Mountains. They go south. The chain becomes part of the Andes and stuff like this. And it was, I think, widely understood in Mormonism that these were the everlasting hills that Isaiah talked about, in the tops of which the temple of the Lord would be built.
Well, it's a wonky geography. We believe that the Garden of Eden was in Missouri. I mean, honestly, it's very hard to get your bearings in terms of what's where and what it means.
Yeah, good point. Oh, by the way, in Japanese, that was Kodai America wa Kataru. Ancient America Speaks. We had that film strip. I'm not sure what our Japanese investigators thought of it, but it was fun for me. Okay. Oh, look, there's another north to south large river. It's the Hudson. Oh, that's in New York. Where was Joseph Smith living at the time that he translated the Book of Mormon?
And if you remember, the Book of Mormon says something like the land of many waters or whatever, and there's all those little lakes all around Joseph Smith's neighborhood, you know?
Finger Lakes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But no, the Mesoamericanists are sure that these are waters that are in southern Mexico on the east coast, I believe. That's where those many waters are, not in Joseph Smith's backyard.
Right.
Swords go from red to green. Yay, swords. Go swords. But swords is an elastic term when it comes to Mormon apologists. We know about the sword of Laban from 1 Nephi 4:8 and 9. And I beheld his sword. I drew it forth from the sheath thereof. So there's a sheath. The hilt thereof was of pure gold. Really? Because that doesn't sound really like a good material to make a hilt for a sword out of, because it's kind of soft. But Nephi assures us the hilt thereof was of pure gold, and the workmanship thereof was exceedingly fine. And I saw that the blade thereof was of the most precious steel. So that's what the sword of Laban is like. It's kind of like what we would think of a Middle Ages kind of sword, or a sword that a knight might have when he goes into battle. And here's a piece of art trying to replicate or produce an image of that sword of Laban. And you can see what it looks like. It does look like something that a knight would have, not necessarily Laban back in 600 years BC. We also know that Nephi made many swords after the manner of the sword of Laban, and used the sword in defense of his people, as did King Benjamin. Benjamin later delivered the sword to his son Mosiah II, and we have references for all those. So we know that they had the sword of Laban. We know they made many swords after that manner. So that's what we should be expecting to find in the Americas, if that's going to serve as some kind of evidence of the Book of Mormon, is a sword that resembles the sword that's described in the Book of Mormon as being mass-produced and used. But that's not what we get. What we get is a maquedal, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but a maquedal. And Bill, could you read the first paragraph, and Rebecca, you the second here?
So a maquedal is a weapon, a wooden club with several embedded obsidian blades. The name is derived from the Nahuatl language and means handwood. Its sides are embedded with prismatic blades traditionally made from obsidian. Obsidian is capable of producing an edge sharper than high-quality steel razor blades. The maquedal was a standard close combat weapon. And I understand the point here. If these were modeled after the sword of Laban, that doesn't make any sense. The sword of Laban seems to be a traditional sword, and any weapon modeled after that sword should look sort of like a traditional sword. And what you end up here almost pretty much is a club with sharp points attached to it, and not quite the same thing, but we're supposed to, if we believe the apologist, we're supposed to believe these are the swords that were modeled after the sword of Laban.
Right. As Rebecca reads the second paragraph, remember that this is all it took, and what it took to turn the red box green on swords in the Book of Mormon and swords in the Americas.
I feel like the apologists would probably say, well, they used the natural materials that they had. They had wood, they had obsidian, and they knew they needed a weapon that was sword-like. So, ooh, look, here I am being an apologist. All right. How do you pronounce it again?
Maquedal, I think.
Maquedal. Wow.
Maquedal.
This is difficult. Use of the maquedal as a weapon is attested from the first millennium CE, although specimens can be found in art dating to at least pre-classic times. By the time of the Spanish conquest, the maquedal was widely distributed in Mesoamerica. The weapon was used by different...
Can I interrupt you again? Can you read that line again, by the time of?
Yes. By the time of the Spanish conquest, that makes a big difference. The maquito was widely distributed in Mesoamerica. The weapon was used by different civilizations, including the Aztec, sorry, I'm just squinting here. Does that say Mexico? Mexicas. There we go. Olmec, Maya, Mixtec, Toltec, and Tarascans. So used a lot. Oh, look, there's a
Where did you
picture
come
of
up
it.
with that, Bill?
Look
I
at
just
that.
went online and looked up maquito.
That's amazing.
And here's what you find. This is a replica modeled after the Sword of Laban right here. So
Right.
here is Laban's. Here is a next gen Sword of Laban right there.
That looks like a really, really nice one that was made recently. I don't know that they have any complete Macahuitls from 1,000 years ago, but I found one that's not as nice looking as that on the internet. Let's see. Are you able to take that down, Bill? Because I think, yeah, there you go. Those are the ones I found. And I put Sword of Laban ? Because these are another replica of what these Macahuitls are. These are the swords that now, having been discovered, even though they were known in the, once again, the Spanish conquest, everybody had them, that now turns the box on swords from red to green.
And this gives you permission to turn a red box into a green box.
Yeah. And I will leave that to the audience to make their own determination as to whether they think that that box should still remain red.
If they said it was modeled after a cricket bat, I could buy into it. I could go, I see it. I see it.
Yeah, the other one looks like pickleball. Do we have any information on how they were used? It almost seems like these would not be used by like a sword, but to like just hit people over the head, more like a club.
Well, they are a club. They have sharp edges on both sides, and that's what the obsidian blades end up doing, and they're embedded. Very, very sharp. They could take off arms, heads. There's even one account of a horse's head being hewed off with one blow from one of these.
You could cut off so many arms. You could probably fill a bag full of arms with these.
You probably could. You remember? Do you know what the Book of Mormon says? How many arms it was that Ammon took to the Lamanite king?
How many arms, RFM?
So many.
An armful.
An armful of arms.
So
that's a Hebraism.
That's the answer to that. Oh, that's right.
Right there.
Oh, we haven't talked about the animals yet. I'll save that joke for later. So that's the Sword of Laban. Now, I also made this notation because as I was going from one chart to the other, and I can see there's more red in one than the other, but there's also green in the earlier one, as well as green in the later one. And I made a note that having green boxes in the 1842 chart makes it harder to track the changes in 2005, at least for me. If I were doing this, I would probably have insisted on making all the boxes that are red in the first chart so that I could see more easily how many are turning green in the second one. I mean, you can get the idea that especially in the second two columns, there's a lot more green than in the first chart, but really it's not easy for me to get my head around exactly what's happening there. So that was just an observation. Human sacrifice went from red to green. I'm looking for human sacrifice. Can you find human sacrifice on there?
Isn't it? I think it was on
middle
the
column at the very bottom,
middle,
third from the bottom.
Yep. Human sacrifice goes from red to green between 1842 and 2005. They actually did human sacrifice anciently in the Americas. And then I say human sacrifice not known in 1842. In 1519, once again, that's 310 years, I believe, before the Book of Mormon was dictated. 16, 17, 18, 29. Yep. Explorers such as Hernan Cortez, I've heard of Cortez, conquered the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan and made observations of and wrote reports. What? He wrote reports about the practice of human sacrifice. Bernal Diaz del Castillo, who participated in the Cortez expedition, made frequent mention of human sacrifice in his memoir, True History of the Conquest of New Spain. There are a number of secondhand accounts of human sacrifices written by Spanish friars that relate to the testimonies of native eyewitnesses. The literary accounts have been supported by archaeological research. So it's very clear to me that anybody who cared to find out knew that anciently, in these ancient, huge, massive civilizations that existed in the Americas that were conquered by the Spanish, that they indeed practiced human sacrifice. And yet it goes from red to green in the chart. And my question here, and I'm wondering if this is what John Clark is doing, is John Clark distinguishing between archaeological discoveries after 1842 that support literary accounts from before 1842? And I don't know. I get the feeling that's what he's doing. He's talking about archaeology confirming it. But is it really that amazing if archaeology confirms after 1842 what basically everybody and their dog knew from all of these resources and these books and these memoirs that were written and in the public domain? What do you think about that?
That's a brilliant point, because I feel this is the kind of thing that Joseph Smith would have known. He loved the extreme adventure story. He loved the sensational story. And I feel like he obviously would have known about this part of the past. I think most people would have known.
Bill?
Yeah. The only thing I would add is if you actually treat the chart appropriately, you end up with a nothing. In other words, maybe half the list starts off green. There are things that Joseph Smith could have possibly have known about the geography and archaeology of his time. And then you fast forward to 2005 and pretty much the green one stayed green and the red one stayed red. And what you end up with then is just a bunch of anachronisms that haven't been shown. And the things that started off green are things that maybe he could have known to begin with. And so you end up with really nothing exciting at all, except that it looks very strongly running counter to the claims of the Book of Mormon.
And I wonder if you made a chart about all the things that should be in and around the hill Cumorah. All of those would be read in 1842, and they would be read today, according to John Clark himself.
Yeah.
So that's probably why he didn't do a chart like that. Wild beasts. They go from green to green. Now that's the left column, third up from the bottom. Wild beasts. You see, they were green in 1842. They're green in 2005. And I say, why are wild beasts on the list at all? Obviously,
what place doesn't have wild beasts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What dirt?
Name
place
one
doesn't have
place.
dirt?
Name one place in 421 AD to, whatever, 1000 BC to 421 AD. Name one place that doesn't have wild beast.
This was my thought. Obviously, the Book of Mormon mentions them, and obviously they existed in Joseph Smith's day as well as among the Mesoamericans. The problem is naming any civilization that did not also have wild beasts existing among or near them at any point in history. The category of wild beasts is so broad as to be statistically meaningless. And I have a little 30 there, which means that's my last slide. Rebecca, do you have any thoughts about that? And then you can use that to segue into your slides, which pick up from here.
I literally have wild beasts right next to me right now. So they're everywhere all the time.
Can we hear Alice growl?
I don't know. She was. Look how
Wild
terrifying,
Alice
isn't it?
Officially the mascot of, well, not Mormonism Live, but
No.
the Mormon Newscast.
Oh, no, she growls when she doesn't hear things that, hears things she doesn't like on the Mormon Newscast. That's exactly right.
She's stealing away the hearts of the audience.
She is. I'm petitioning to get her growl put on the intro when you say, the news of our world unfolds. Roar. I think that would be really funny.
And I want to have that picture because you did a mock-up.
I did. I put Alice up there. Yep, I absolutely
with all
did.
of our pictures for the newscast. And I vote to have that included.
It's very funny. So before I start my section, and I have to say it's funny because Arfan made all these slides and then he said to me, make some slides. And I'm like, I can't, I'm busy at work. I can't. And then I said, fine, I'll make one slide. And then I'm like, wait, no, this is so fun. These are so great to go through. And I kind of went down a rabbit hole, but I wonder if we can go down to my bonus material. I would just like to draw people's attention to the fact that there were 2 more charts. I don't know if John Clark himself put them together, but someone used this model and they continue with the red-green theme. So here we have 2014. It seems to me on this one that some of the green went back to red. It seems like there's less green than there was on the other. But again, they're trying to show this. And then we have a very current one, 2023. Yeah, look at this. See, this is the payday right here. This is what they want the faithful members to look at. Look at that. it's pretty much solid green. There's no need to worry. Everything has been solved and explained, and there's no concern. So I think this is the big moment right here to get to this chart where everything's green.
Right. And so that everybody knows, in 2005, when John Clark was making that presentation at Fair Mormon Conference, he mentioned that a couple of other research writers, including Matt Roper was one of them,
Yes.
were taking over this project and going to try and update it, periodically. So I expect that Matt Roper was behind this, as well as this other fellow. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name.
Yeah, I think so too. And I don't know if we went through the little kind of grid or the legend. Confirmed is green, right? It's been confirmed. Nothing to see here. It's all good.
Yes.
So unconfirmed means it's red. There's a problem. We don't know yet. And then there's another one called undetermined, and that's yellow. It's like, yeah, maybe there's something, maybe not. I don't know how they arrive at that, because to me, a lot of the confirmed are unconfirmed, but they do concede that there are some yellows. So, okay, now go back to where my slides start, just so that we have shown kind of where these charts went in the end as to this really feel-good moment of almost everything is green.
Okay, I'm going to do my best to find it. That was my wild beast.
Oh, there you go.
There you
Wild
go.
beast. That's right. Is that what I put next? Okay.
That's your very first slide.
Okay. So military costumes. I just kind of like looked at the list kind of randomly, and I honed in on that because I thought they were going to talk about the picture I have on the right, right? Who do we think of when we hear military costume and church history? We think of Joseph Smith, of course, right? There he is.
General.
Dressed like a general. He would walk up and down the street, apparently, with a walking stick and a ring, and there he is in his general costume. But that is not what they were talking about, because I would have agreed that red, well, it should have been green the whole time, because he was wearing his costume in 1842. So he was always in military costume. But I learned from a little research on Fair Mormon that military costume actually refers to armor. Headgear, full body armor. And of course, I did AI here to get some Aztec warriors in their full-on Knights Templar armor. There it is. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, I'm going to let either RFM or Bill read this. It's all about armor, because this is in the same vein as metal swords, right? The same kind of thing. Somebody read one paragraph and somebody read the other.
So while armor was known and used by some peoples during some periods of the Book of Mormon history, at other times it was not. The text's first mention of armor is set in Jerusalem around 600 BC, when Nephi wore Laban's armor to impersonate him. In other instances, armor is spoken of metaphorically, as in Lehi's admonition to his sons to put on the armor of righteousness. By the way, you have to know what armor is if you're going to tell people to put on the armor of righteousness. Hence, it becomes logical to think that armor does exist in the day, even if it's not directly mentioned, because if you're going to teach your children a thing and tell them about butterflies, you have to then expect that butterflies are present in the culture, for instance.
Or you just have to have access to Paul's epistle to, I think, the Ephesians, where he talks about putting on the armor of God. Is it chapter 6, Ephesians? I can't remember.
If they're all reading their scriptures.
Yes. In other instances, very much so.
In other instances, armor is spoken of metaphorically, as in Lehi's admonition. Most references to armor are in relation to military conflicts set in the New World.
Back from my brief stint, and happy to report it's Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 18.
Look at that.
What do you know? Those Nephites, they really knew their New Testament. The first mention of armor among the Nephites is among Limhi's people. During their conflicts with the Lamanites, for their part, often fought without armor, especially during early periods of Book of Mormon history. Enos mentioned that the Lamanites in his day only wore a short skin girdle about their loins when they fought. Several generations later, Zenoff recorded that the Lamanites were naked, and they were girded with a leather girdle about their loins. So I guess they were naked, except for the leathern girdle about their loins. In later times, however, the Lamanites are said to have been girded with armor as well. All right, so we've made it through that.
Yeah,
Anything
it was
else
a
you wanna
lot.
make?
There's a lot of talk about armor, and you're absolutely right. Bill was absolutely correct that to use that just so offhandedly in metaphors and talking about it, you're assuming that everyone knows what armor is. So it was a thing, apparently. The pictures that I've added, of course, are the famous picture from the Book of Mormon. There's Captain Moroni, and he has sort of a full suit of armor there with a little bit of leather. And just for you, RFM, I added some pictures from our favorite movie. Do you remember the armor in The Oath?
I remember the armor in The Oath.
Yep, absolutely. And what you have to think about is the infrastructure that would have to be in place in a civilization to outfit how many millions of warriors were there in some of those final battles. It's the same as the steel swords, the idea of smelting and creating this level, this scope of armor. Clean Hill, there's nothing. What do you guys think about armor?
Well, also you have to remember that armor is like swords. Okay.
Yeah.
The armor is not really armor. It is thick padded
Yes,
material
right.
to try and
Woven.
cover and protect.
Mhm.
So it serves the purpose of armor in a way. It's trying to protect the vital areas of the body in combat.
Obsidian
not
proof.
metal.
McQuaddle proof.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think that's
nothing's Macaweedle proof.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. If you run up into one of those, you better run the other direction.
I'd like to see a battle with, the woven armor and the obsidian bat. I think that would be great. So
Steve McGill says we don't need armor. We have garments.
I know, I was laughing at that. That's perfect. So,
We don't
but
need no
obviously,
thinking botches.
when most people picture the Book of Mormon, especially young teenage boys, they're like swords, armor, battle, and it makes it very exciting when you think about that. You don't really pay attention to the archaeological lack of evidence. So,
Yes.
Batches?
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was
Batches?
going to say,
What?
We don't need no stinking batches. So anyway, I just wanted to play for another minute with that one. Sorry.
I
like
know.
that
No,
one?
it's a good one. No, it
Have
really
you
is.
watched The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, Bill?
I have not.
Great movie. Great
Okay.
movie.
Yeah.
I recommend it highly.
There's a problem with this entire level of blacksmithery that would have had to exist. And again, we're not going deep on any of these. Each one could be an episode on its own, but there's definitely a problem. So
Well, I think we know that Joseph Smith did not engage in blacksmithery. He only engaged in whitesmithery.
in what or wife smithery. I don't know. There was a lot of smithery going on. I'm not sure.
Wow.
All
good
right.
comeback.
If
Good comeback, Rebecca. Next
I
slide.
thought so. Okay, so here's the other one that I just thought was really interesting. I was looking down that list of animals and I saw, okay, so here's the story. And maybe you guys can relate to this. When you're in Sunday school.
Now, I know you're doing an introduction to this, so
Yeah.
I'll help you out.
Yeah.
When we come up with this list, and I'm talking with Rebecca about it, she can't talk about anything except the asses. She's got
I'm
a total
sorry.
ass fixation on this
I
list.
do.
She's like,
She's
why
working
is
the field,
ass?
though.
What's
I'm
with the
going to
asses?
explain to you why with my story, and maybe you
Okay.
guys can relate.
I just
So,
want to make sure the
when-
audience knew that.
oh, I'm getting there. So, when you're a kid and you're in Sunday school or you're in Young Men, Young Women, and they read scriptures, they have a page there and they say, we're going to read so and so through so and so. Do you not skip ahead to see what verse you're going to have to read?
Sure.
And I did that. And every single time I had to read something that was really uncomfortable, I would have to say the word bosom, or I would have to say the word ass every time. And you're just sweating hairballs sitting there going, oh God, I don't want to say that. You're like
You're
10 years
sweating
old.
hairballs?
Yes. When
Wow,
you're
that's
a
a lot of
kid.
anxiety.
When you have to say an embarrassing word I bet some of you guys can relate to this, reading ahead and seeing what your teacher is going to make you read. So
Yeah.
anyway, I have this weird, I look down lists of words and I'm like, oh, look, there's the word ass. I don't know why I just did. So again, it's red ass in 1842. It's red ass in 2005. It's red ass in 2014. But
So basically, it's
suddenly,
a mandrill all along the way.
exactly. Suddenly in 2023, it's yellow ass, right? It is unconfirmed ass. What do you think of that, RFM?
I think I got a mandrill ass confused with a baboon ass there for a second. I apologize.
Anyway, all right. So I did a little research on this and I looked in Fair Mormon, and the question in Fair Mormon is, why is the ass donkey mentioned in the Book of Mormon? And it says the only clue to the role of the ass in Nephite society is a reference those in bondage, bearing of their burdens like a dumb ass. Doesn't really say that. I guess I never had to read that particular verse. That would have been really funny.
I think so, because remember, they're under bondage by the Lamanite overlord.
Yes. Yes, I think that's probably what it is. Other mentions occur in 1 Nephi 18:25, Mosiah 5:14, somewhere in Ether, and Mosiah is a quotation of the Ten Commandments.
As in not
And
coveting your neighbor's red
I
app.
think that's it. See, those are the kind of verses I would end up having to read. It's very embarrassing. I swear others can relate to this. Donkeys appear in the Book of Mormon, 1 Nephi 1:2, where Nephi, Sam, and Lemuel led donkeys, camels, and sheep in their father's caravan. Now, I
You wanna
copy
tell
and
the story
pasted
about
this.
this one, Rebecca? Do
What?
you want to tell the backstory on that
Yeah,
last
I was
line?
just starting to tell it. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Um, I copied and pasted this out of a faithful site. I can't remember if it was Book of Mormon Evidence. It was not Fair Mormon, but it was one of the other ones. And our Fair Mormon and I were talking about this, and I'm like, this doesn't seem right. It doesn't say this, does it? And you're correct. It doesn't.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No, I called up Rebecca and said, "Where did you
Yeah.
get this?"
Where
Because
did you
that's
get this?
completely inaccurate.
Yep.
There are no donkeys.
Yep.
There are no camels. There are no sheep mentioned in 1 Nephi 1-2, going along with the Lehite party. In fact, there are no animals whatsoever that are mentioned. And one of the reasons I know that is because one of the jokes circulating in Mormon circles back in the 1970s was, what animal did Lehi and his family take with them when they departed into the wilderness? And the answer is a flea, because God commanded Lehi to take his family and flee into the wilderness. That's the only animal that's mentioned. And of course, that's just a joke.
Isn't it strange that when chariots and horses are mentioned near each other, we dismiss it, and then when nothing exists at all, we add it in?
Yes. And this looks like it was maybe a little help from Hugh Nibley in his book, Lehi in the Desert, where he was not satisfied with Lehi and company not having any camels. So he envisioned Lehi as being a caravaneer, I believe, and insinuated into the text a bunch of a caravan of sorts, certainly including camels. So this is another thing that happens with apologists, that a lot of times they think the Book of Mormon needs a little help along the way, and it doesn't really make sense for Lehi and his family to go leaving Jerusalem without any animals whatsoever. And then it's an 8-year journey before they reach the other side in Bountiful and make that ship out of what tools, I'm not exactly sure. But it's not even that good. It's actually even worse than that, because if you look in 1 Nephi chapter 2, which I'm looking up right now, what we find there, is it verse 8? No, it's verse 4. And it came to pass that that's Lehi, and it came to pass that he departed into the wilderness, and he left his house and the land of his inheritance, and his gold and his silver and his precious things, and took nothing with him, save it were his family and provisions and tents, and departed into the wilderness. So when I say it's even worse than that, it's not just that no camels or sheep or donkeys are mentioned. Verse 4 of 1 Nephi chapter 2 seems to indicate that they're not there at all.
Sorry, I'm trying to look up a word here. There is a style of anachronism where it's so obvious that it would be there or they'd be using it, you don't even bring it up. It's unnecessary to bring up. So it's a given they need animals. They would never travel anywhere without their animals. They would die within a few days without their animals. So there's no reason to mention it, because it's just a given. As if I were to say, I'm leaving my house, I'm getting in my car, I'm going to the store. I obviously have my keys with me. There's no way I don't. It's not going to happen. And so I don't even need to mention that as one of the things that I have with me.
You could make it better saying I'm going to the store without mentioning that you're going in your car.
That's true too. That would be even more nebulous, more wiggle room. But yeah, I wish I could have found back where I got this, but I know it was like either Book of Mormon Evidence or something like that. And I did copy and paste it. So, but yeah, so let's find out. The red ass.
The other thing is, though, I'm sorry to interrupt your red ass.
No, go ahead.
The other thing about this is that the interpretation that is off the table is that Joseph Smith did write this the way he meant to write it, and that there are no animals because he didn't think to include any animals, and that would be an indicator that this is fiction.
Right.
Yeah. And my only last thing I would want to say before you switch to the next one is, this is why you don't look a gift ass in the mouth right here. This is why. If someone gives you a gift ass, You
take
don't
it.
look it in the mouth.
That's
No
right.
reason to
You take
complain
it.
about its teeth. Just be happy you got a nice gift.
Yeah, that's it. But can you guess why now this is an unconfirmed ass? That means that they're pretty sure they know exactly what's going on with it. How do they find ass mentioned in the Book of Mormon? Any guesses? Let's go to the next slide.
Oh,
It's our
did you do
favorite
that,
thing.
Bill?
Say that again.
Did you switch the slide?
I did it.
I didn't
You
do
did.
it.
Oh, you
I've
can do
taken
it. Okay.
charge. I'm the master of my own domain. I'm
Please.
doing it.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
There it is. As we learned from Fair Mormon, ass has been suggested as a lone shift, meaning that the translator chose a different word to represent it for the tapir, which many have described in decidedly horse-like terms. So again, it's a catch-all, right? It's a horse, it's an ass, it's a horse's ass, it's everything.
Yeah, and
There
as
it
we
is.
talked on the phone, this is where the Book of Mormon creates trouble for itself. And the apologists have this problem, which is that the Book of Mormon itself indicates that it's a very tight translation. Remember, this is all happening with the gift and power of God and Joseph Smith reading the words that are being projected supernaturally above the stone, which are translations of the corresponding Reformed Egyptian text, which, according to some accounts, also appears. He reads it off. It is confirmed to be correct by being read back, and only once it is written down correctly do they proceed with the translation. Curulams and Cumums show that this is a tight translation.
Yep.
You can't get otherwise unknown animals with the exact spelling of their names without it being a tight translation down to the actual letters, not just the words, but the letters. So you have that issue in the Book of Mormon. We all know about that, right? The problem is that in the same book that manifests tight translations by giving apparently original Nephite names for these animals that otherwise we don't know exactly what they are, we also have ass and horse and goat. And we have John Sorensen, who I think was the first person to do this, talking about these lone shifting words. Yes, lone shifting words do happen, like the hippopotamus, the river horse, right? Which is not a horse, but it was called that by people who'd never seen a hippopotamus before, the Greeks in Egypt. So, but the problem is that in a book that has Curilam and Cumum, if you have another animal that doesn't have a corollary to Joseph Smith's day, then you would expect for it to have a Nephite term and not an English term that applies to animals in Joseph Smith's neighborhood and within his knowledge, but which were not present in the Americas before Columbus.
Yeah. In fact, the perfect tight translation is that Nahum requires a tight translation. Yep. And then, like you say, here, ass requires a loose translation.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So they want to have a tight translation where it helps them, and then a loose translation where it helps them.
Exactly. And as Mosiah just said, we can just call it a tight ass translation and we're going to cover all the bases. I thought that was brilliant.
Mosiah, he's a funny character. Very funny. I laugh regularly when I read Mosiah's comments.
He's awesome and amazing. All right. So I think we've solved the mystery of the unconfirmed ass. It's not red yet, but it's on the way. We think it's a tapir.
It's a yellow ass.
It's a yellow ass. That's right. Okay. So here's another one of my favorites. And again, how many of us have done podcasts on, literary, capabilities? I've done so many with Dr. John Lundwall. Please look them all up on Mormonish, little plug. But
we had him on here too on Mormonism Live.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. He's been all over this, which is great. And so natives could read was red in 1842. Natives could write was red. And then suddenly in 2005, it was green for no apparent reason whatsoever, because that's completely not accurate at all. But I put this picture in. It's a very famous painting. It's John McNaughton, and it's a little dark, but if you can see it, it is, I believe, what most faithful members of the church really believe Book of Mormon days were like. I know my parents believe this. You have Mormons sitting at a table. Little Moroni is under the table playing with some toys. You have rugs. You have stairs. You have candles in a chandelier. You have the sword of Laban in the background. You have a metal shield. You have golden plates. You have a library, wall-to-wall scrolls. He's writing. This is what they really believe it was. And it was nothing like this. This did not exist. This is a complete fantasy. And again, we've all done podcasts on this. There's a lot to go into, but what are your thoughts on this? This painting just says it all to me. I once posted this and asked people, spot the anachronism, kind of a little spot me game. Hundreds and hundreds of comments. There's just everything wrong with this painting, although it's a beautiful painting.
The decor in the 1960s was big on wall-to-wall scrolls.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. Yeah, that's it.
And
by the way, that doesn't, go ahead.
I'm just going to say that from John Clark's point of view, Mesoamerica has to be it, and the Mayans have to be it, because they are the only civilization from north to south in the Americas, anywhere in the Americas during Book of Mormon times, that had the technology of writing. And I think that's what he means by natives could read and natives could write. And notice he makes those, if you know, it's the upper right column, I believe. But he makes these into two separate boxes.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you can write, I mean, is there a civilization that can write but can't read? Is there a civilization that can read and can't write? I'm doubting it. So it seems like he's taking this and making it into two, where normally it would actually just be one.
Yeah. Well, they do claim that, because they do claim it's a priestly class, and they even wiggle around with the word read. When you hear King Benjamin's message was, no, they're not reading it. They're having it read to them, as if you could keep hundreds and thousands of people, even Lamanites and Nephites, mixing together. They're not going to teach their family members reading and writing. It's not going to happen. There's no way it doesn't spread at all. And they were a completely oral, if not secondary oral toward the end culture. You can look at any of our podcasts about this topic. It's really fascinating. And as Dr. John Lundwall said on both of our shows, the greatest anachronism of the Book of Mormon is the book itself. It was not a literary society.
Lee, that is a child under the table. That's Moroni, in case you didn't recognize him.
It's cute little baby Moroni. Jr. Yeah.
Can I just do this for a second? Because I'm sure that this is what this was patterned off.
Yep. Arthur made this. Yep.
That's JFK Jr. playing under the Resolute desk while his dad is behind it. It's obviously a posed picture, but very cute and very famous. And I think that probably serves as the basis for this picture of Mormon with little Moroni playing under his Resolute desk. Bill, did you have something you wanted to say?
I just wanted to ask you guys a question. So, Mr. Lundwall, Professor Lundwall has put out, I don't know if he's professor, maybe I'm saying that wrong, but
no, he's a professor. He's
Professor Lundwall.
College professor. Yeah.
So Professor Lundwall has made the argument that we don't find any artifacts with the sort of literacy that the Book of Mormon imposes its people had. And John Clark here is saying that the Mayans, and you guys are agreeing to some extent, that the Mayans are the only culture that have a writing system. Why are those two things opposites? Help me put those two together. Why is Professor Lundwall saying one thing, John Clark, and you guys are sort of agreeing, says the other? It seems like there's a discrepancy there. Something's not true.
No, it's an example. It's an example of taking anything you find anywhere and making it fit your narrative. You have to have the right time, purpose, and place. Those three things have to exist. Writing in the Mayan culture, it was secondary oral, right? When they wrote about a ritual. They were not writing I Nephi being born of. That did not exist. It was, but again, it's writing. It's some
squiggles on a rock. It's a very basic writing system.
Yes,
it's the first stage of writing. Ritual. It's not far enough along.
Exactly. It's a name.
Can't handle
Jaguar, Penis King. I mean, these names they had were crazy, right? That's what they were writing on rocks. Or they were, writing a ritual, dancing for the sun coming up. This is what they were doing. But again, certain apologists, they see writing, they're like, oh, look, writing. And it's kind of in the same area. No, right time, right place, right purpose. Purpose is the one we forget. Purpose is a huge one. And again, this is a much bigger conversation, but just in general, that's a great question. And I love to show this painting because I know people like my parents that were just huge farms. Oh my gosh. They still read the farms books. They drag us to all the conferences in the 70s and 80s. This is what they really believed. And it was really exciting to them. This idea of scrolls and plates and writing, they really believed it. And I think a lot of people did and still do.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest problems they had among the Mayans was keeping the Jaguar Penis King away from the red asses.
The whole show is just deteriorating. And I have to say, it's my segment. I'm sorry. Usually it's you guys. I don't know what's wrong. Just don't have me back. That's all I can say. So I think that's the end of my segment. Although, could we go forward to the very end where I did that? Yes, here we go. So if you go back to that other chart of 2024, there are only 3 things that are red, only 3. And that is the submarine barge, wheat, and a goat. So as I wrote here, please don't let the submarine barges, the wheat, and the goat shake your faith, because it's just a matter of time. Those are the only things left that have not been confirmed, or at least sort of ish confirmed. So don't let that affect you.
Isn't it interesting that goats are giving the apologist conniption fits?
Yeah, when an ass isn't.
I mean, I saw goats recently, and I wasn't even in the Rockies.
Oh, can
There's
I just
mountain
say,
goats and all sorts of goats.
I
in
wish
the
I could show
United-
this picture. I was in the McDonald's drive-thru right before coming on the show, and I hear this sound. Wah, wah. I'm like, what the hell? Have I been thinking about goats so much that I'm hearing them? In the truck in front of me is a goat. It stands up and it looks right at me, and it kind of goes, Rebecca. I'm not kidding. There are goats everywhere.
And they know your name.
And they know my name.
That's a
I'm
bad
not making
sign.
this up. I have a picture. I'm going to find it while you keep talking.
Shouldn't these goats in your pictures be wearing scuba gear?
And chewing on some wheat. Of course they should. That's exactly how it works.
Because they
But-
are underwater, aren't
Oh,
they?
here it is. Okay. I wonder if I can hold this up close enough. I bet I can't. You can see a truck bed and you can see a goat right there. Right?
I can see the truck bed.
Yeah.
goat,
The goat's
I'm
kind
having
of right
trouble
in
with.
front sideways.
Oh, is
I'll
that the
post it
goat?
later. I'll post it on your site. Yeah. It has a little head and it's kind of looking at. I'm serious. You can't make this stuff up.
Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you have here? Did you
I
want to
had
talk
a
about
couple
these,
different
or-
things. I thought this was really good. I had kind of some bonus material just along with the topic. This is Neil A. Maxwell. He says all the scriptures, including the Book of Mormon, will remain in the realm of faith. This is what you mentioned before. Science will not be able to prove or disprove Holy Writ.
Why
However, it what?
not? Why not?
Yeah, why not? Because you need the faith. It never should. We have to be able to exercise our faith. That's how I took it.
I mean, I understand that science is never going to be able, and history is never going to be able to prove whether Jesus performed the miracles that are ascribed to him in the New Testament. But there's a host of things that history and science and archaeology can and does prove to show that it was a real place with real
Yeah.
people and real cities that actually existed.
We know where Jerusalem is. You
We
can
don't
go
have
there.
any of that in the Book of Mormon.
Nope, not even the land, the continent, the place in the world. But I think it's just a way, it's covering your bases ahead of time. Like when you tell somebody, oh, don't expect much out of this, right? And then you
Right.
don't expect much. And then at the end, when you didn't deliver much, you say, see, I told you not to expect much.
They're
That's exactly
managing
what this is.
expectations.
Exactly. It's managing the expectations. It says, however, enough plausible evidence will come forth to prevent scoffers from having a field day, but not enough to remove the requirement of faith. Believers must be patient during such unfoldings. So it's covered right there.
I don't know. I think we're having kind of a field day today.
I feel like we are having, goats and everything. So another statement by Neil Maxwell, he had a lot to say about this in Evidence of Faith. It says, there will be a convergence of discoveries, never enough, mind you, they're saying this again, to remove our need for faith, to make plain and plausible what the modern prophets have been saying all along. You do not expect incontrovertible proof to come in this way. You should never expect it. No, but neither will the church be outdone by hostile or pseudo scholars. I guess they're calling, I don't know, us pseudo scholars.
Wow.
That's kind of ironic.
Ouch.
I know.
The only true scholars are the ones who support the church. Otherwise, you're hostile or pseudo.
Yep.
Or
Yep.
as Boyd K. Packer put it, so-called scholars.
So called. That's right. And I think I did have one more slide. We probably don't have time to go through it, but I just see Rebecca's
Oh.
bonus editions. Use them if you want. The Smithsonian letter. Have your viewers and listeners heard about the Smithsonian letter? Have you guys heard of that?
75% of our viewers have.
Yeah, I just love to draw attention to
Oh,
that because,
yeah.
and we don't have to read through the whole thing, but basically there were so many rumors and if you scroll down, I actually have a copy of it. So many rumors going around in the 70s and 80s about, even the Smithsonian uses the Book of Mormon as a textbook. They learn from it. They learn to understand their discoveries. And finally, enough people wrote to the Smithsonian that they said, okay, we got to put a letter out. So the first letter that they put out in the early 80s, late 70s was kind of harsh. I don't know if you want to read a couple of these, but they would send this out to anybody that wrote to inquire about the Book of Mormon. And it's a shelf breaking letter. I don't know.
Why don't we alternate these paragraphs and make sure that Rebecca gets the one with the
Yeah, no, I can't see.
embarrassing words in it?
No, I can't see it at all. You guys alternate and oh, now I can see it.
Okay, you get the one with ass and bosom in it.
Yes, I know. Thank you. I'm actually getting traumatized all over again from being 10 years old. I'll read
take the first one. I'll take the first one. It's
Okay,
the
you
shortest.
take the first one. And don't read the paragraph at the top because that's kind of what they arrived at later. They used to send out
right.
this numbered list.
Right. The Smithsonian Institution has never used the Book of Mormon in any way as a scientific guide. The Smithsonian archaeologists see no direct connection between archaeology of the New World and the subject matter of the book.
The
Yeah,
physical type of American Indian is basically Mongoloid, being most closely related to that of the peoples of the Eastern, Central, and Northeastern Asia. Archaeological evidence indicates that the ancestors of the present Indians came to the New World, probably over a land bridge known to have existed in the Bering Strait region during the last ice age, in a continuing series of small migrations beginning from about 25 to 30,000 years ago.
I'm just trying to picture somebody getting this letter after they sent this really nice, sincere letter to the Smithsonian and they get this back. Number 3, present evidence indicates that the first people to reach this continent from the east were the Norsemen, who briefly visited the northeastern part of Northern America around AD 1000 and then settled in Greenland. There is nothing to show that they reached Mexico or Central America.
And in my eagerness to do the short one in number 1, I get stuck with the long one.
You have the long one.
One of the main lines of evidence supporting the scientific finding that contacts with old world civilizations, if indeed they occurred at all, were of very little significance for the development of American Indian civilizations, is the fact that none of the principal old world domesticated food plants or animals, except the dog, occurred in the New World in pre-Columbian times. American Indians had no wheat, barley. I was just thinking that shows it's kind of like from 1979 or 1980, the fact they're saying American Indians.
Exactly. This is dated. So yes, please excuse that.
Had no wheat, barley, oats, millet, rice, cattle, pigs, chickens, horses, donkeys, camels before 1492. Camels and horses were in the Americas along with the bison, mammoth, mastodon, but all these animals became extinct around 10,000 BC. At the time, the early big game hunters spread across the Americas.
Yeah, this was known decades ago.
Yes. And as an apologist and knowing how they respond to these, what they would do is they would make a great deal out of the fact that the Smithsonian Institution statement doesn't even know that the Book of Mormon doesn't mention camels. So why are they even mentioning camels? They don't even know the Book of Mormon well enough to know that the Book of Mormon doesn't say anything about camels. Therefore, we can dismiss everything else they have to say.
That's right. Probably someone wrote in about camels, though, because that was the going narrative back then. And it goes on with just more statement after statement that we probably don't need to go to. There's a whole nother page. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
We don't,
let's do it. And I just got done. So that means it goes back to Rebecca.
Back to me. Okay. You have to make it bigger. Okay. Here we go. But again, I just try to picture these people getting this letter back and going, oh, because the Smithsonian Institute was really respected. RFM and I were talking about this. It had TV specials and the magazine. I mean, everybody was really into it. It was the upper echelon of scientific data and archaeological finds. So number 5, iron, steel, glass, and silk were not used in the New World before 1492, except for occasional use of unsmelted from meteors, iron.
Meteoric.
Exactly. Thank you. Meteoric rise. I've never had one, so I can't pronounce it.
You're having a meteoric rise. Your popularity is amazing. It's just going way, way up.
Well, then I better learn to pronounce the dang word. Native copper was worked in various locations in pre-Columbian times, but true metallurgy was limited to southern Mexico and the Andes region, where its occurrence in late prehistoric times involved gold, silver, copper, and their alloys, but not iron. Who's next?
I guess it's me.
So I guess it's you.
Number 6.
Number 6. There is a possibility that the spread of cultural traits across the Pacific to Mesoamerica and the northwestern coast of South America began several hundred years before the Christian era. However, any such interhemispheric contacts appear to have been the results of accidental voyages originating in Eastern and Southern Asia. It is by no means certain that even such contacts occurred with the ancient Egyptians, Hebrews, or other peoples of Western Asia and the Near East.
Yeah, this is pre-DNA research, right? This is late 70s, 80s. Here's a good one, RFM. Read number 7.
No reputable Egyptologist, Carrie Muhlstein, John Gee, no reputable Egyptologist or other specialist on Old World archaeology, and no expert on New World prehistory has discovered or confirmed any relationship between archaeological remains in Mexico and archaeological remains in Egypt.
Boy, I just pictured just people's faces falling. And they're so
But they both
excited to
have
get a letter
pyramids.
from the Smithsonian. And it's like, oh,
They both have pyramids, though.
yeah, I guess that's true. Number 8, reports of findings of ancient Egyptian, Hebrew, and other Old World writings. So they covered all the bases here. In the New World and pre-Columbian context, have frequently appeared in newspapers, magazines, and sensational books like the D&C or the Book of Abraham. None of these claims have stood up to examination by reputable scholars. No inscriptions using the Old World form of writing have been shown to have occurred in any part of the Americas before 1492, except for a few Norse rune stones which have been found in Greenland. Everyone should read the book 1492. If you really want to know, it's pretty much this letter on steroids. All right, last one for Bill, I think.
There are is this supposed to be there are no copies, or is this
No,
supposed
it's
to be
supposed
there?
to be there are copies.
Yeah, there are
This is
copies.
actually responding to all these questions that they
Yeah.
get in writing. And
Oh,
I
I
think
got
that
you.
as they got more and more questions, they probably modified and expanded this
They
letter.
did. Yeah.
There are copies of the Book of Mormon
Yeah.
in the library of the National Museum of Natural History, Smithsonian Institution.
Yeah, but we don't access them or read them or use them. And again, this statement morphed. I think they realized that this was just breaking people's hearts. I mean, I just picture my parents writing the Smithsonian, getting this letter back. I mean, I don't even know what they would have done. So in later years, it was just sort of a more nebulous statement. Like we know it's not supposed to be a historical book. We know it's supposed to be faith-based. It's just some very nebulous statement like that. So, but it's a real thing. And they do cover it on Fair Mormon. They have to talk about it. So
I almost think that last line is to say, yeah, we have copies of them, but look at the very first one. We
Yeah.
don't use it as a scientific guide.
Yeah.
Rebecca, you were telling me that your parents had talked about this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I would not be surprised to learn that they had written a letter to the Smithsonian.
Oh, I mean
Institute.
about how the Smithsonian uses the Book of Mormon
Oh,
as
yeah.
a guide for their archaeological digs.
Yeah,
in
that's what I
Middle
mean. Yes.
America.
Yes, like I said, my parents and my grandparents who would go on those tours and they'd come back and they had all the facts. It was all Book of Mormon. There it was. Everything was tied up with a nice Mesoamerican bow. That's what everybody thought back then. And it made things, I don't know, you got goosebumps when you read the scriptures on Sunday because you knew where it came from and you had the pictures in the Book of Mormon to look at and you knew people that had traveled there and it really connected you to this big story, you know? And now the big story's gone. It's not real.
What a wonderful rumor. What a wonderful faith promoting rumor that the Smithsonian Institution uses the Book of Mormon as a field guide for locating ancient ruins.
Yeah.
I feel the spirit just saying it.
I'm telling you, goosebumps. It's goosebump material.
Yeah. And then they write this and, just break people's testimonies in half like a twig over their knee. Now, you were saying something about this very first paragraph because later on they stopped giving the detailed blow by blow testimony crushing letter and just said,
they just say it's a religious document, not a scientific guide. It does not use it because again, the Smithsonian, I'm sure they're trying to be kind, but then there's a point where you have to defend your reputation as a scholarly institution and say, no, sorry, but they did do it in a kinder. Yeah, there you go. That's what I was trying to do. They do it in a kinder way later on. So
hey, something happened there. And I don't know what it was, but I did it by accident. Sorry about that. Anyway, fortunately, it wasn't compromising.
Can I share one more thought here, RFM?
Please.
So and I'll put it up so we're all on the screen. There's also what I was talking earlier about reverse anachronisms or the other side of the coin, which are things that show up in let me say it differently, things that show up in I'm going to word this wrong. Make sure I want to say this right. Whereas an anachronism is something that shows up in the Book of Mormon, but isn't found out in the real world. A reverse anachronism is something that's found out in the real world and should be showing up in the Book of Mormon.
Mhm.
And I actually got this wrong. The one is incorrect, but two anachronisms you guys pointed out. John Lundwall says that yes, the Mayans had a written language, but it was an early stage of writing. It could put out simple things. No way was it designed to write out King Benjamin's sermon.
Right.
And never has any artifact been found that has that stage of writing on it. Hence, there is no one in that time period with any evidence base using that sort of writing. The other one is the Eastern World crops. So this is one that I've thought of before, which is 1 Nephi chapter 18:24 talks about how the Nephites took with them seeds, and also similarly in Ether 2:3 it says that they took with them seeds, and Ether 6:13, and also in Nephi there's some other spot that sort of implies it, but in Ether 6:13 it says that those seeds they tilled the earth. I simply want to note that in the old world, two transoceanic voyages, those folks brought with them the seeds that they were used to growing. They get to the promised land, they plant those seeds. We're told that they grew, by the way, 1 Nephi 18:24, we did put all our seeds into the earth, which we had brought from the land of Jerusalem, and it came to pass that they did grow exceedingly. Wherefore we were blessed in abundance. We do not find crops in the Americas that match the Eastern world, and we should. And then just to note again, the unclean hill, the very first one is one of these reverse anachronisms where the hill should have stuff in it and it doesn't. And so there are things that an anachronism is something the Book of Mormon says was present and the real world doesn't have, but there are also things that the real world had that should have been in the Book of Mormon that weren't there. And so there's a whole nother set of things that could be a whole nother chart. And those also stand out as being evidences that the Book of Mormon is not historical as well. Anyway, I didn't make the point great, but at least to sort of.
No, I understood. I thought it was a great point. Now, when you say John Clark says an unclean hill, do you mean that that's what it should be?
Yeah, that's what it should be. It should be an unclean hill.
Of artifacts there.
There should be so many bodies. In fact, the problem is so bad, by the way, that even the church's apologists, some of them, I'll use Mike Ash as an example. Mike Ash's workaround for the problem is that the Nephite authors, the Book of Mormon authors, were embellishing the numbers significantly. So no, there weren't 1 million people fighting. That was just their way of embellishing and telling a big story. It was only 312.
Still 312 will leave remains.
Something. Yeah. And so you can even sense the apologists are, for them, it's even stretched really thin, and they're having to come up with, well, the Nephite authors were making up a bigger number than it was.
Right. The Book of Mormon itself is indefensible, and therefore the text must be modified in order to make it defensible by the apologists.
Yeah, and I would say that the things that aren't there are in some ways more important. And I'm glad that you brought up, crops and things like that. On Mormonish, we were trying to find a botanist to talk to about this. What should be there? And also that's something that God wouldn't have taken back to heaven. There's all these excuses for the metals gone, the bodies are gone. The plants would still be there. They would be everywhere, So we were trying to find somebody. We did find somebody who was an expert in that area. But as we often find, they didn't want to rock anybody's faith by talking about their area of expertise. So it's difficult, it's difficult to get people to discuss these kinds of things, because I think that's a big one. The other thing that isn't there is, as you said, Bill, any evidence of any kind of literary anything, anywhere. That doesn't go away. That should have been there. It should be everywhere. And it's not.
And it's deceitful to use the Mayans' writing as an evidence that the Book of Mormon literacy level is met, like that qualification is met.
Yeah.
That's
We're
not
talking
real.
land deeds, right? We're
dishonest.
talking, they're a fully literate
Oh,
society.
now you're back to land
that
deeds.
no,
Oh,
I know. I had to say that. But
there
in the
you
Book of
go,
Mormon,
Rebecca. You're just stirring the
no,
pot.
I said the wrong word. No, but you know what I mean? Records and epistles and talks and histories. They're a fully literate society like Rome. And in, you've only found maybe 5% of the literary leftovers of Rome. You should find at least that there. They were that. It takes that kind of a society to produce the kinds of things that were mentioned in the Book of Mormon, a fully literate society. And those Mayan writings, that's not what that is. That's a ritual writing, that's something like that. It's really interesting to look into. And once you kind of see it, your mind just gets blown and you think, why didn't I ever see this or understand it? And I'll tell you why, because it's goosebumps. It's that painting. It's amazing to think about that, but it's not, unfortunately, it's not accurate.
Yeah, in retrospect, I'm surprised at how much time I spent as a Mormon not thinking about Mormonism. Certain paths having signs on them saying, do not enter, beware, knowing that I don't want to go down that path because if I do, I may find something that's going to be very troubling to my testimony, and therefore making the conscious decision to not go down that path, to not think about it. I'll think about that another day.
Yeah, those are the landmines and the hand grenades.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're about to the end, I think, of what we had to say. Do we have any people on the call line?
We do. We've got 3 of them. So I'll put the first one on.
I hope these are 3 questions for Rebecca.
Let's see. Caller, what's the name?
Is that me?
Yep. Yeah. What's the name, caller?
Drew.
Drew. Go ahead, Drew. You're on Mormonism Live.
Awesome. I'm a little nervous. This is my first time ever calling in. So I just wanted to share a thought. This was thought. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't be nervous. There's only thousands of people who are listening right now.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
So this is a thought I had a while back. I remember thinking this when I was listening to Dr. Thomas Murphy on Mormon Stories forever ago. And basically my realization was that in all my time in the post-Mormon space, I didn't know anything about what native culture was. All I knew was what it wasn't. I knew that there were no horses. I knew there were no, barley. But I didn't know anything about what it was. And that made me really sad. And I think it's really sad that, there's kind of a lot of that in the ex-Mormon space. We spend so much time deconstructing this, settler colonial narrative in the Book of Mormon. And then we don't ever really fill in that space with active knowledge of native culture. And so kind of in the spirit of that, I'm not a scholar of any native cultures. I am an amateur linguist. And what I can do, I can the international phonetic. In the spirit of all that, I would tell you guys, try to give an accurate reproduction of the pronunciation of that word for sword that we were talking about earlier.
Let's hear it, Drew.
So whenever you're ready.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Go for it.
It is Makwawitu.
God bless you.
It's got a very interesting.
That's
yeah,
amazing.
it's got that sound at the very end. That's really, it's very unique. It's not found in almost any language, but Nahuatl, which I think is just a gorgeous language. So, anyways, yeah, thanks for letting me call in.
No problem.
Love the show.
Thanks, Drew. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment about his call? This is exactly what we're talking about. Once you find out what the culture was, it becomes very obvious what it wasn't and what it could not be. And it cannot be what it describes in the Book of Mormon. And like Dr. Lundwall and Dr. Murphy, I've had them both on my podcast. They are saying we have stolen these cultures because we've appropriated them with Mormonism and the Book of Mormon lore. That's not what they were. You need to find out what they are, and then you'll realize very clearly what they never could be.
He just made that weapon harder to pronounce. So I'm just going to go with Swords of Laban, or is it copies of the Sword of Laban?
Obsidian sword.
It's Swords of Laban or
Swords
Sword of
Laban,
Laban.
not copies of the Sword of Laban. Gotcha. Okay.
No, and this is another thing that I have to give kudos to Mormonism, okay? Because if it were not for Mormonism, I would never, ever have encountered or been talking about Makwa beetles,
Yeah.
however one pronounces them correctly. Thank you for that, Drew. I mean, would we?
No.
Would we ever be talking about these things? No.
No.
Mormonism gave us this, and it's a
Mhm.
gift. It's the gift that keeps giving.
You're right, though. There's a lot of cool information that has nothing to do with Mormonism, other than there has some tangent relationship.
Yeah.
And because of it, we've had the chance over a lot of years to learn a lot of cool facts about how the world works and things that happened in the past.
Egyptology,
Yeah.
astronomy,
Yeah.
apocryphal writings,
Chiastic
civilizations
structures.
living under the polar ice cap.
Yeah. Chiasms.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
All sorts of things. So we owe Mormonism a great debt of gratitude for our education.
It's
Yeah.
all through the lens of Mormonism. That's what I like to say. All these different topics. Any topic can be viewed through the lens of Mormonism and made that much more interesting.
Through the eyes of love.
All right. Our next caller is a regular. It's Ted.
Holy
Ted,
crap.
go
Is
ahead,
that
Ted.
Ted?
Yeah, Ted.
Blew
I
my
don't know what
brains out
happened.
all over my ear.
Go ahead, Ted.
Hello, this is like the dream team, you guys. Like, yeah, I loved it, and I was thinking you guys need a name. Like, you can't be the Rat Pack, you can't be the Brat Pack. And when Rebecca mentioned ass, I was like, anti-Mormon scholarly scripts. But then when I said ass pack out loud, yeah,
Oh my God.
that's not gonna work.
Bill's the ass man.
Yes, man.
Ward Radio would have a field day with that. But anyways, RFM, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you're back. And I wanted to say, like, as far as anachronisms go, yeah, like, so when the missionaries first came over and mentioned that they came from the Middle East, like that, I don't need DNA evidence. I don't need anything to know that didn't make any sense to me. And then they said, well, just read the Book of Mormon, and immediately, like, like horses, like, none of it, like, it was very hard to get through, knowing all those things. But yeah, it was the anachronisms right from the beginning that turned me off to it. But
Wow, you're a smart guy.
yeah.
I swallowed it hook, line, and sinker, and then went on for decades as a member of the church, fully observant, and even went on a 2-year mission to Japan over these anachronisms.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, because RFM, I wanted to say you brought a tear to my eye when you showed that quilt with DC and Marvel. But I mean, I guess I'm skeptical that you're really expanding your horizons. But still, like, it's a start. And
I don't even know what you're
I
talking
certainly
about at
wouldn't
this
want to be
point. What quote are you talking about?
Yes, sir.
I
Yes,
said
sir.
so many things. It's hard for me to remember them all.
Yeah, you put a quilt on just a couple of months ago, and I can't remember if it was on one of your shows. I don't know if it was Sunday School or Shakespeare, but somebody made you a quilt with DC and Marvel.
Oh, the quilt. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Funny. Absolutely, she did.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You were saying quilt, and I was hearing quote, and that was the problem. That's why I was saying I don't remember saying that. But yes, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Swanee is bringing
Oh, no,
Marvel
sir,
and DC characters together in a beautiful quilt of peace and harmony.
It was beautiful. Yeah. But I wouldn't want to be the one that tried to convince you that Mormonism was false. But not you're there, so maybe you'll get there with Marvel and DC. But I don't know.
Oh, is one of those universes true? Are you saying the DC
Well,
universe
a
exists
lot of
and the Marvel universe doesn't?
Oh, I love them both, but they both share from one another. That's all. That's all I mean to say about that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ted.
Ted, thanks so much for calling.
All right,
It
sir.
was great talking to you.
And then we've got one last caller, and I think they want to talk about Book of Mormon anachronisms. So which was the topic tonight, of course. So what's the name, caller?
Hi, this is Perry.
Perry, you're on.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm calling all the way over from Japan, so pretty stoked to be on.
Konbanwa.
Well, it's konnichiwa here right now, but
Oh, is it?
konbanwa to y'all.
Sumimasen.
It's tomorrow. I'm calling you from the future.
Ashtakata.
So,
That means from tomorrow, doesn't it?
so what's that?
Ashtakara.
Yeah, ashta from tomorrow. Ashtakara. So one of the things that you brought up in this episode is the 1842 dates and why that was a little bit suspect. I thought that was kind of an interesting point. I wondered too if that date doesn't allow them to hide behind not needing to look at biblical scholarship. So problems like Deutero-Isaiah, the long ending of Mark, the way the Apocalypse of John is referred to in in First Nephi in the vision of the Tree of Life, and
what is John?
like they just completely dodge the Book of Revelation, the Apocalypse of John.
Oh, okay, yes. And not to mention the Gospel of John when it's talking about it's better that one man should perish than that a nation should dwindle and perish in unbelief. I think that's from John's Gospel.
Right. The fact that the Spirit of the Lord is quoting Caiaphas to justify the slaying of Laban is also a little bit of a problem.
Yeah.
And I do find that First Nephi itself just completely disproves the historicity of the Book of Mormon, including the fact that story is physically impossible to have occurred the way that it's described in text. But no, I do wonder though how much they use this particular chart, the way that it's structured, and that 1842 date. I think you make a really good case for the research that was done in the Maya and that allowing the transition. But I also wonder how much this also allows them, or how much they benefit as well from being able to avoid biblical scholarship that really wasn't developed in the 19th century and became more of a early 20th century, mid 20th century paradigm for creating even more anachronisms that are actually textual and aren't going anywhere.
I think that's a great point. Also, things in the Apocrypha, which Joseph Smith had in his family Bible, talking about writing on metal plates.
Right.
So we have a vehicle for the information coming into Joseph Smith's mind, which may be completely separate and independent of any archaeology.
Right. And I think that that's exactly how it manifests. It's entirely a product of his mind and not from any archaeological record, which is the most cogent and coherent and best explains the data argument to make, I think. But apologists like to do these nice twisting into knots and mental gymnastics in order to create a way of kind of squeezing faith in places that it really doesn't belong.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Did you have a question for Rebecca? Because
yeah,
she's
thank you.
over here dying for someone to ask her a question.
No, I'm nodding because I agree with everything you said. I thought that was great. You paid attention tonight, and that was a great point of view.
Yeah, no, hi, Rebecca, by the way. We've had a little bit of a back and forth in other places. I need to follow up with you again, but hi.
Hi again.
All right.
Okay, well,
so
Perry,
much,
thanks so
caller.
much for calling. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you. And you are the
Thank
third
you, guys.
caller. You're the third caller. It's the third and final caller. We are at 2 hours and 17 minutes into this program. I've had a lot of fun. I hope everybody watching has had a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Rebecca Bibliotheca, if that is your real name, and Bill Reel for joining us. Bill Reel always, but especially Rebecca for joining us tonight and for all of the work that you did in preparing for tonight's show. So thanks everybody for watching. Please join us next week, next Wednesday at 6:20 p.m. Mountain Time for the next episode of Mormonism Live. Good night, everybody.